Testing. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia City Council Chambers. This is a regularly scheduled Committee of the Whole working session for the City Council and staff. I'll call this meeting to order. Today's date is Tuesday, August 15th, 2023. The time is 9 a.m. Welcome to everybody in the audience, those who are presenting today, and those who are listening at home. We have a pretty extensive agenda today. It may take a little bit of time to get through it, so please, we ask for your patience as we move forward. So we'll turn this agenda over to our City Administrator, Britt C. Bennis. Britt?
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is Matt Reed from SCH, and the first item to talk about is review and approve the change order number 1 for Silver Lake Trail Improvement Phase 2, and it's actually 2A.
Morning, Matt.
Morning. Yeah, so sometimes we have things happen on projects that turn out for the better. And this is one of those situations, actually, believe it or not. So just a brief explanation on this contractor started on this, excuse me, on the Silver Lake Trail last week, and they were finding there was some pitting and some they look like washouts, for lack of a better term, underneath the pavement. There was a lot of them, actually, quite a number of them. And as it turns out, the steam line, which we knew was there's actually 2 steam pipes under there, surrounded by a concrete vault. That concrete vault was crumbling. It's just old, deteriorated, it's been there a while. So we were gonna have to address that one way or the other, but the good news is the Public Utilities actually was at the point where they have decided that line is gonna get shut down permanently. So as of a few months ago, that wasn't necessarily gonna be the case, and so we were gonna leave the steam lines in place, but now it's been decided that it's gonna be shut down permanently. So as with a lot of the steam lines in town, we're able to remove them and get them out of there, and we won't have to worry about them anymore. So again, this is one of those situations where timing worked out pretty good. If it would have waited if they would have started a little bit earlier, it probably wouldn't have worked out that way. So what's in front of you, I guess, anyway, today is a change order request. The unit prices that the contractor provided were certainly reasonable for the work that they're doing. The total does add up a little bit. I know Public Utilities indicated they would contribute to the cost of this. So I can answer any more questions anyone might have, but I would certainly recommend moving ahead with the change order, and this will provide a much better long-term result for the project.
Thank you, Matt. Councilor Philippe.
You said they'll contribute to it, or they will cover the cost of it?
I don't want to put words in their mouth, Britt, but I thought they said they would cover the cost.
That's what I thought, too.
Yeah.
And given that, then I would make a motion to go ahead with moving forward with this change order. Thank you.
I'll support that.
Thank you. Councilor Philippe moves to approve the request for the change order, supported by Councilor Motley. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Item number 2 is discuss the project scope for the 2024 Street and Infrastructure Improvement Alley Project.
All right, so that's me again. So we had a public hearing, I don't know, a few months ago, I guess it was, on the alley project. This is the one that we had gotten, I believe it's $3 million in earmark money, I guess you can call it. And we had decided on 3 alleys down by on the south end of town here. And in the public meeting, it was actually brought up by one of the residents, what are we going to do about the alley? There's 2 of the alleys that have alleys connecting them. If you look on the exhibit, I think this is in your packet.
By 2.5 Street there?
Yes. There's actually there's 5 of them, 6 of them, where the alleys, north-south alleys connect. They're short little alleys that connect the east-west longer alleys that we were planning on doing already. And the resident actually brought up, well, what about those? And that got us thinking, well, yeah, probably should be thinking about that a little bit closer. And so we looked into it a little more. Jim and I and some others met on that. There is sanitary sewer in those alleys. We do not currently have access to that sanitary sewer directly because there's no manholes in there, so we don't really know the condition. But based on the televising that Jim had done on the sanitary sewer for the alleys themselves, it's likely not in very good shape. So we wanted to bring it forward and see, all right, so what do we do here? I did include a couple of cost estimates for you to review. The first estimate was, excuse me, That was the original estimate to do the alleys. That was the $6.3 million and some change. The second estimate would be what it would cost to add those 6 connecting alleys. That's about another $800,000. So I guess we have a few options that we wanted to run by the council and see what your thoughts are. I have a recommendation that I'll provide at the end, but we can go ahead with the project as is and just not worry about the connecting alleys. That'd be one option. We could add the connecting alleys in and move forward with those plus the project that was proposed. We could adjust the overall scope of the project. In other words, we could maybe look at removing one of the alleys, which one that would make the most sense would be the one on the farthest to the north, which again, that alley, we picked it for a reason, so they really all need to be repaired. But that said, the other thing that we could do is we could move ahead with the whole project, get everything designed, bid out everything, and decide to bid that north alley, the northernmost alley, as an alternate. And then we could see how the prices came in at that time and make a decision whether or not to move forward with that. So those are, my recommendation would be at a minimum, do the last one, where we at least bid it out and see where it comes in and then make a decision. I know talking with Jim, obviously all the alleys need it. It makes sense that if we're gonna go through the project and do those alleys, not doing the connecting alleys just doesn't make any sense. So we really should be considering doing those. So I'll stop talking and let you guys ask questions if you have, or make comments, and then we can see where this goes.
Okay, but before we go around to the council, the recommendation from Jim and I think that last option makes sense. So let's see where the bids come in and then go from there. We can make adjustments and moving forward there, so we may have some good news, I don't know. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, and that's what I was gonna say, is getting the base, because it's all connected, and then have that alternate. And I would guess, but there might be opportunities for us for additional funding because of that. We can ask and see what happens once we get a total bid and need to know what that is. So that's what I would support too, is get a bid with the alternate, and then we can move forward from there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else in the council? Councilor Freely.
I would just make the motion to move ahead with the bid alternate and get the additional recommendations for the full project.
Thank you. Moved by Councilor Freely. Is there support?
Support.
By Councilor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Matt?
Maybe just for process purposes, what we'll end up doing, assuming this passes, we will have to amend the feasibility report and hold another public hearing because we're adding on to the project. So I'll work with Britt and we'll get all that scheduled and keep that moving forward. But just for process purposes, you'll see that coming forward as well.
Very good. Thank you. I think we anticipate we'd have to have another public hearing with respect to that. So any further discussion? Councilor Motley.
Just to clarify, this would be estimate 1, 2, and 3, so the whole thing.
Estimate 1 and estimate 2 only.
So we aren't including number 3?
No, so
Your recommendation was not to include number 3?
no, so the estimates in your packet,
Right.
estimate 1 was for all of the alleys that we originally had talked about. Estimate 2 was to add in the connecting alleys. Estimate 3 was provided for reference purposes. This is what it was for the northernmost alley. If you decided you wanted to remove that, it was just there for discussion. So
Gotcha.
I think the motion was to go forward with everything, at
Okay.
least for now, right? Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Motley. So it has been moved and supported. Any further discussion or clarification? Councilor Freely.
And I think that's because we heard from those residents on those stub alleys that thought, if you're gonna be there, why would you not do ours as well? So if it requires an additional public hearing, so be it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Matt. Item number 2 is Greg Knutson and Devin Sagler from Walker, Drew, and Haney to discuss our 2022 audit.
Good morning, Mr. Knutson and Mr. Segler. Thank you for appearing today and giving us the final report on our audit. Green?
Okay,
We're good, both of us. Okay, great.
thank you. So, thanks for inviting me and inviting the auditors to discuss the audit. This is, the audit is for the city of Virginia for the year ended December 31st, 22. And we're well into 23, so we have to keep that in mind as far as the timing of it all. And the good news too is the extension is till, for completing the audit is August 15th. We basically got it done yesterday, August 14th, so we're gonna hit the state's extension deadline. So that's some good news. And as we move on, I'll hit the highlights. You have a clean opinion again this year. We've audited the financial statements for the year end. In our opinion, everything is referred to, present fairly in all material respects of the financial statements of the year end. And I'm on page 2 of the handout. Moving to page 3, you can see it's dated August 15th, which I previously had mentioned. I just looked at the audit is 116 pages. The handout's 31. I'm not going to go through every one of them just for everybody's, to expedite things and get it done. On page 4 and 5, this is the government-wide financial statements. And as you can see, the governmental funds end of the year at a net position, and this is everything in the full accrual with both undepreciated cap assets, long-term debt, and any other thing that's long-term for government-wide. Just under 23 million in the governmental funds, but the unrestricted is 24 million in the whole for the governmental funds. Looking at the business funds, we're just above 78 million, and these are all the proprietary enterprise funds. I'll go through those in detail a little bit later by breaking down by the enterprise fund. And you can see of that 78 million, 21.5 million is unrestricted in the business type. As far as the changes, the governmental funds, previous year was at 26 million. The governmental funds net assets went down by 3,159,000 to the 22.9 million. And the business type in total went from 110,000 down by 32 million to 78 million. I'll move to page 7 of the handout. The general fund balance is 4,339,000 at year end. And you see the breakdown between non-spendable restricted. The ambulance fund has a deficit of 517,000. The Iron Trail Convention Center has a deficit of over 2.2 million. Some of these numbers are concern and, to be downright truthful, a little startling. And so the governmental fund balance is, like I said, 10,298,000, of which 13 million is restricted and 3,066,000 is unrestricted deficit. As far as the changes there on page 8, the general fund went from a fund balance of 6,782,000, actually had a net change of a deficit of 2,443,000. A good reason that the revenues less expenditures was 1.4 million, and they also had a net transfer out of another thing of about $1 million, million of which went to the Iron Trail Convention Center, thus bringing the fund balance down to 4,339,000. And at the rate of that loss, it would be 1.7 years before the fund balance was totally wiped out. You would have a zero fund balance if you continue to overspend at that rate. And moving on to Iron Trail, or the ambulance fund, in 20, that had a fund balance of positive 873,000. 21, a deficit balance of 72,000, and at year ended 22, 517,000 deficit. So you can see the trend there, what's happened in that particular fund. Down, down, down. So concern there. And the Iron Trail Motors Event Center, which is relatively a new fund, looking at the middle on that column, deficiency of revenues over expenditures of 2.5 million deficiency. And then there was $1 million transfer in from the general fund. So even with that, the deficit in that fund balance for the change is 1.5 million. So fund balance went from 764,000 in the hole to 2.2 million in the hole in that fund. And the other governmental funds basically held their own. And there's the non-major funds, there's in the audit and some of the review coming up, we'll highlight it, but basically they had a deficiency of 4.1 million in those funds, but there was notes issued of 4.4 million 5, so in overall, the fund balance increased by about 480,000 and went from 9,808,000 to 10,268,000. So that is the highlights of the governmental funds. Moving on to the proprietary funds, page 9 and 10 has the net position, the balance sheet per se, as it used to be called, at December 31st. Just moving across the bottom, the public utilities, 54.5 million is fund balance. The hospital is done as far as a city fund. Sewer, 18.6 million. Solid waste, 911,000. Golf course, 471,000. Washington Manor, 1,266,000, and the clinic facility capital lease, 2,364,000. So at year end of the 78,245,217 of the net assets, 55,607,751 is invested in cap assets, 150,000 restricted for debt, 919 restricted for OPEB, 40,000 for maintenance repair, and 21.5 million for unrestricted. Page 11 and 12 is going to have the changes in the enterprise funds. Public utilities had a operating loss of 4.5 million, and coming through the non-operating expenses, 181,000 net, but then a big item there is an extra item, an impairment loss in the public utilities, bringing the total change in that position to just under 28 million in the public utilities. Like I said before, the hospital had 1 year depreciation and then basically loss on the net book value of the cap assets of 4.6 million, and the transfer in to zero out that fund. So next year you won't even see this column in the audit because the hospital is no longer a city facility. Sewer fund had a net operating income of 194,000 and a net operating expense of 604,000. So therefore that a change in that position of 12,354, relatively speaking, breaking even. Solid waste disposal fund had a loss, 3,031, and then it also had wasn't a good year for interest income this year for any of the city's funds. 67,000 in deficit interest revenue. So they had a debt decrease of 70,600 in the solid waste. The golf course had 130,854 operating loss. Washington Manor had 173,502 operating gain, and with their non-operating, they had a payment in lieu of taxes. 665,000 in total is the net increase to the net position of the Washington Manor. And the clinic facility lease, 960,000 operating income, 367,000 in net not operating expenses, bringing the decrease, or the increase in the fund balance to 593,000, or just under 600. So in total, counting the public utilities and all the funds, the fund net assets decreased by 32.2 million, as you can see over on the right on the totals column, page 12, third line up, bringing the net assets from 110,484 beginning of the year down to 78.2 million end of the year. Page 13 talks about your custodial fund that you have, basically money held for the Children's Memorial Park custodial fund at year end, 43,000 is in between cash and net of accounts payable on that account. Okay, I'm going to move to the notes. Note 2 talks about all the funds that have a deficit fund balance on page 14. Ambulance, Iron Trail, your big ones, a couple one debt service fund, and then your big one, 2021 street and infrastructure capital projects funds, deficit of 1.6 million, 307,000 in Northern Heights. The MEC building fund, that's actually the building fund for that building, capital projects, just under 900,000 in the whole. IRRB demo capital projects, 10,000, and the new 2023 street and infrastructure capital projects fund, about 190,000 deficit. In total, just under 6 million funds that have deficits, and the city anticipates the deficits will be eliminated by future revenues or transfers from other funds. I'm going to turn to page 15. This is your capital asset summary. Governmental funds went from 69.5 million at the beginning of the year and had net increases over the depreciation of 4.6 million, bringing the ending capital assets to just over 74 million. And the business type, which includes public utilities and all the solid waste, sewer, golf course, started the year at 103 million net fixed assets. And because of the impairment and plus the net amount, you actually had a decrease of 22 million, and 28 million of that is depreciation. And there was other decreases, 4.6 million. So by year end on all the funds, basically some of that is a correction for some of the net capital assets is no longer being used. Went from 103 million to 75.8 million in net capital assets, net of accumulated depreciation. Moving on to page 16, there's a new GASB called leases receivable. So anything more than 1 year in its material gets booked both as a leasee or a lessor. And there's 2 of them that were done. One of them has to do with the clinic, and I believe the other one has to do with, if I'm not mistaken, they're both in enterprise funds. Well, regardless, healthcare facility, which is the clinic, and lease. That's a lot smaller one. So in total, looking up 17, here's the long-term it's receivables. So receivables are now in the book, but it's offset by deferred inflows of 3,237,963 that you collect within the next 3 years. And you also receive interest of $228,800 based on those long-term lease receivable agreements. Moving on to long-term debt, page 18. The governmental fund went from 39 million. You had two new debt that was recognized in a year, 4,573,000, the 4.5 million of grant anticipation bonds. And I believe that's the public health, or the public facility.
Public safety building.
Public safety, so, thank you. Had a mind freeze there. And basically, it's paid off in principal 1.9 million, getting the year-end balance on the long-term debt just over 42 million for governmental. And your business-type funds, which includes the long-term debt for not only the city, but the public utilities, which is part of the city, went from 22 million, paid 2.5 million off in principal. Your ending balance is 20,278,000. And page 19 has a snapshot of those debt, 38, and these are not including the unamortized discounts or premiums. So you have 38,366,000 in principal and governmental funds, and over 12 million, and it shows how much is due in 5 years, separate, and then 5-year increments after that. Business type, the same type of review, 20,254,000 and 2.5 million interest, and then the grand total to the right. Moving on to OPEB, and this includes all of the cities, governmental and the enterprise funds, and it also includes the public utilities. So you started the year with a net liability of 21.7 million, and at the year end, it's 22 million. And these are based on actuarials, includes life expectancies, increases in rates, and sort of a complicated formula, but it has to be booked. So at year end, your net OPEB liability is 237,000 higher than the beginning of the year. Page 21 has your transfers in. We talked about a little bit before. In the bottom right, who's getting the transfer in. You can see $1 million went to the Iron Trail Events Center special revenue from general. That was a big one. And there was also some transfers between the sales tax revenue, 303,000, and then also has to do with your tax abatement and VITA special revenue, and then there's other transfers in. So those are all broke down on the bottom of page 58. Page 22 has your governmental fund equity. I think we talked about before, but this breaks it down. What makes up the non-spendable, what makes up the restricted? Non-spendable, 2.5 million, restricted of 14.7 million. What's committed and what's unassigned. The numbers that comes to my attention as the unassigned in total, you have 346,000 in general, and you can't have a restricted or anything other than unassigned if it's deficit. So you can see this. Ambulance special revenue was 541,000 unassigned, 2.2 million in Iron Trail and a non-major. All the other funds, 3 million. So in total, your unassigned fund balance is in excess of 5.5 million deficit. Numbers that come to concern. Looking at reviewing the audit. Page 23 has the commitments on the construction projects. Shows that you, of those 6 projects, you spent 11.4 million, and the commitment left of just over 2 million. Talk quickly about the budget amount. General fund, you budgeted 14.3, but you got 184,000 less than a budget in revenues, and you budgeted 15.2 million for the expenditures, but you spent about 15.6. So you overspent compared to budget in the general fund of 385,000. And counting the transfers and everything, the original budget has your fund balance going down 432,000. It decreased by 2.4 million, as I mentioned earlier. So the deficit is, compared to the budget, 2,011,000 as a negative amount. Same analysis of the ambulance fund, basically budgeted to break even. You spent 440,715 more expenditures compared to revenues in that fund, bringing the total change, a negative variance of 444,000. And page 26, again, of the same analysis of the Iron Trail Event Center. Basically, it was budgeted to have a 1.3 million transfer in of 935,000, anticipation that you would only lose only 403,527 in the fund. And as you can see in the second to last, third column, the net change is in excess of 1.5 million. So the negative variance in total, going to the bottom line on the final column, over 1.1 million. And I do want to, before I get into the final notes and the findings, I want to bring something up positive. And that's your sales tax, the 1% sales tax the city gets. So the amount in 2020 was 1.8 million that you got in, and 21 was 2.3 million, and 22 was 2.5 million. So it's a upward increase, upward trend, and your sales tax, your two sales tax revenue bonds outstanding have 22, just under 23 million principal left, and 4 million as it stands right now in interest, so 27 million. So at the current rate of sales tax, you have about 10.5 years left at the current rate of the 2.5 million. I anticipate that to increase, but some of that is coming out of the pandemic and the economy increasing, so it's numbers to keep in mind anyway. Moving back to, I guess it's page 26A, I didn't number that page. Talks about the two funds at an excess of expenditure over budget, and that relates to the previous page, 385,000 in general fund and 1.2 million in Iron Trail Event Center Special Revenue Fund, and a little paragraph below explaining how they were funded and what's the anticipation, how they're going to be funded in the future. Moving to page 27, segregation of duties. We still have that as a finding due to limited staff, and I think the anticipation with the staff that you have, and hopefully the trend is such to possibly eliminate this finding, but as of right now, we still have, due to the the concentration of duties, the limited number of individuals is not desirable from an internal accounting point, and due to the assigned duties of personnel within the city's business, the segregation of accounting function to ensure adequate internal control has not been met. And we recommend the city council reassign, segregate personal duties in order to ensure adequate accounting control and provide oversight to partially compensate for this deficiency. I know the city has been working on this strong in our whole with the segregation of duties and going forward to basically eliminate or mitigate this finding to as much as appropriate, as much as possible. And lack of control for financial reporting process. Part of the audit manager requested that the audit firm prepare the draft of the city's financial, including the notes. Management has reviewed, approved, and accepted responsibility for these financial statements prior to their issuance. However, management did not perform a detailed review of the notes. Part of the problem is it's part of that audit includes the public utilities, which is a major part of the enterprise funds, and the various notes, but it's something that a plan can be put in place to eliminate this particular finding. Page 29 has the corrective action plan on the City of Virginia letterhead that is included on page 114 of the audit, signed by Britt and Sherry. Lists the action that's planned. And I'm getting to the end of my presentation, management letter. Status of various findings. These are neither material nor what is the term I'm looking for? Yeah, their lesser findings are just included at the back of the back of the book, management letters. Number one, we recommend the city review the city's deposit investment policy, determine if updates are necessary. The city should review the OSA, Office of State Auditors, Statement of Position 207-108 on updating its deposit investment policy. Number two, 8 funds had deficits, as was included previous in this presentation on note 2. The city should monitor, update, payback schedule, and determine the funding source of any funds with deficit fund balances. Number 3, the public utilities, hospital, solid waste disposal, and golf course enterprise funds reported operating losses of $4.5 million, $243,000, and $130,000 respectively. Management should determine a course of action to reduce or eliminate the continued operating losses in these funds. The city's clinic facility reported a deficit in net investments in capital assets of $329,000. The capital assets are depreciating at a faster rate than the principal of the corresponding long-term debt is being paid off. The operations and cash flows of this fund should be continually reviewed. I think that's going to take care of itself just through the payment schedules and the leases. So I don't know if, other than this is FYI, I don't know if there's anything on the city's level that could be done. Grant documents were kept in multiple locations, and accounting personnel did not receive information about grant activity in order to record all of its accounting records timely. We suggest the city appoint one official to track of grant activity, file all the grant information on inflation, and provide grant information to accounting personnel timely to ensure grant activity is properly recorded in accounting records. Number 6, VITA manual checks were not posted to an expenditure code. We suggest the city review the VITA's process for ensuring checks and taking appropriate action to ensure all VITA's activity is appropriately recorded. And after review by the audit, and some of these numbers, like 6 and 7, the information is correct, but had to be corrected by audit adjustments. Number 7, many accounts that have been historically adjusted were not adjusted to reflect activity during the year as it ended. Accounts reconciliations historically declared by the city staff include tax revenues and receivables, special assessments, accounts receivables due to other governments, due to and from other funds, damage deposit, cash, grants, debt transfers, and other capital asset records. This required a significant amount of time from our audit staff and resulted in significantly more of the city in order to record their staff with their proper training. No. We suggest the city review the accounting records of the city in order to provide the staff with the proper training, experience, and resources to maintain proper records over the financial reporting. And to be honest, I think you guys are going to be headed that way. Part of the problem was change in some of the staff. We had an employee that had numerous years there, and it's just a transition period. And I think the staff you have now will be able to do it, and we're more than happy to provide guidance going forward. So the idea is to get the number of adjustments and the time needed for audit back to the previous amount. So amount of adjustments, but there was a lot of time in order to do that this year. I think there's a learning curve. And number 8, 3 major governmental funds had large decreases in fund balance for the year ended 12/31/22. General fund reported a decrease of 2.4 million in fund balances. They reported an excess of expenditures over budget, 385. Ambulance Special Revenue Fund reported a decrease of 144,000 in fund balances. And the Iron Trail Motors Event Special Revenue Fund reported a decrease of 1.5 million in fund balances, and also reported an excess of expenditures over budget of 1.2 million. These funds must be reviewed and monitored to prevent future decreases in fund balances. And just one area of concern I have, we're in August. I don't know where the records are in 2023. The hope is that it leveled out or turned around. I have no idea because those aren't audited, but it's a key question to ask. Where are we so far in 23, or where are we right now, or where are we going to, when I say we, where is the city going to end up the year for the next 2023 audit? Because you can't continue this way. Like I said, there's only 1.7 years left to fund balance at the rate of over expenditures. That ends my presentation.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure there's going to be some questions here. I'll start. So if you look at look at the separation of duties, and we added staff in order to accommodate and address the separation of duties with respect to finance. And then on the page where you say on number 7 on the last page of the accounts historically adjusted, you said that in order to provide their staff with proper training. So I think what we anticipate is, and I think our staff is indicating that, we had a changeover. We had long-term employees that retired, and then we added some additional staff. They're getting up to speed in 2022. And I think, as you indicated, you want to know where we're at in 2023. I think in this particular area of separation of duties, we're in a better position to provide that information. I think we are sending them to the proper training in order to accomplish that. So I think in 2023, you'll see this significant improvement in that regard. So thank you. Questions from the council? Councilor Johnson.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on number 7 too, and thank the finance staff for the hard work they do. It was a learning curve, and I know that you all worked very closely together, and I truly appreciate the time you took. I'm looking around our present there to let you know I appreciate it. I know you're doing a good job down there, and keep it up. One of the things about accounting is this is a snapshot in time. I noticed that a budget is a living document that occasionally gets adjusted, and as looking through our things here that were presented to us, we never really adjusted our budget as much as we just kept it the same and just moved things around. The other thing that I want to point out is that we knew the Iron Trail Motors Event Center would not be very healthy for at least the first 5 years, and that we are this healthy when it comes to the grand scheme, and what we were supposed to be doing speaks volumes to the staff that are there and everything they're doing. And I know the accounting world is totally separate than the real world, and I respect that, and I know that's why you all come and give us this unbiased report. But when it comes to the practicality of what we're doing and what that building is doing, we are far and above where they predicted that we would be when the accounting group, when Isaac Sports Group did their numbers and ran their stuff. We're far ahead of where they thought we would be right now. So when you looked at in isolation, it looks terrible and nothing successful. But when you look at the practicality of what's going on in the building and the events in the community, we're way ahead, and I'm proud of what we're doing in that building, and we'll stand by what we're doing and anticipate. You said that the bonds will be paid off in 10 years as opposed to, I think, were they 15 or 20 years to start with? To me, that demonstrates that we're doing something right. So I appreciate you coming in today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Yeah, just on another note, with respect to the Arlington Memorial Event Center, the anticipation of that, we're going to run this at deficit for a period of time. Doing the comparative figures about what the Miners Memorial Building was done, the old miners, and the deficit we were running every year for many, many years with respect to that. This is less than the losses that we were experiencing at the Miners Memorial Building. But I think in 2023, as you come back for the 2023, you'll see our financial pro forma adjustments being made down the road, and I think you'll see a deficit reduction with the Arlington Memorial Event Center as we move forward. Adjustments have been made. We've had an increase in labor costs, unanticipated expenditures, and those kind of things. But all those are part of that revenue stream and that financial performance moving forward. In addition to that, as you would indicate, the positive note out of this audit, probably the one glaring positive note is the fact that our sales tax revenue has continually increased, and that's the funding stream to pay for the costs of the Arlington Memorial Event Center moving forward. We do have to make an adjustment, take a look at our costs associated with that as far as labor and maintenance and operating costs, but to pay off the debt of that, I think we're fine with that financial performance. So I think in 2023, when you come for that, I think we'll have some significant improvements over time. And I think we anticipate the information that you provided here in this audit in 2022 because some of the challenges we had with the pandemic and these other things moving forward. So I thank you, Mr. Knudsen and Mr. Segler, for coming in and providing this audit for us. We certainly take it very seriously, and we'll continue to work very hard in order to accomplish the goals and objectives and abide by the recommendations you have. That's why we hire you, to provide that information for us so that we can maintain a healthy financial portfolio for the city of Virginia. So thank you for that. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Knudsen. I do have a question regarding the Iron Trail Motors Event Center. You had stated there's 1.7 years in the fund balance. Is that correct?
That was in the general fund.
In the general fund balance. Okay. And then I don't know if Sherry has this answer, did we anticipate or budget the approximate deficit for the Iron Trail Motors Event Center for year 2022?
Mayor,
Sherry?
thank you. Mayor, councilors. Yes, if you'll see that we budgeted $1 million transfer in, and I believe that would zero out when we did the transfers, but they still were in a deficit of 1.5.
So
They spent more than what we anticipated, but if you recall, about 2 weeks ago, I stuck a financial sheet in there of what we anticipated the Iron Trail to be making over the next 5 years. And you see it was a deficit. But it's not to say, well, we shouldn't keep an eye on this. Yeah, we can't be spending this much money. And we have met with Brian and Jim and Brianna, and it's either increase the revenues or you're going to have to cut staff. And that means either you change your scheduling around or something. But yeah, we have to do something.
And I think that's where I feel that there's a seriousness to what's going on here. And I'd like to maybe understand a little bit more what Walker, Drew, and Honey would suggest the city or recommend the city do to stop that from happening in 2023. Because the snapshot that I recently saw, we're not doing very good either for 2023.
Okay, sure.
So I don't know, do you have any recommendations for the council that?
Nothing at this point. What about yourself, Devin?
I guess I would look at page 26 of the handout, 73 of the report. And, I mean, that gives you your budgeted to actual.
Okay, wait, could you reference, like, he's got it up top with the page numbers?
Yeah, that's 26.
Okay, so that's 26. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
And just kind of from looking at it on the surface from this report, charges for services are roughly $500,000. You actually brought in 637. Depending on what kind of revenue you're generating from operating the MEC, I mean, that's what I'm trying to think is what you can control and what you can't control. Depending on how much revenue is coming in, I mean, is that one thing you can control or not? And is that expected to increase in the future? And then you look at the expenditures, where the current expenditures for the culture and rec, you budgeted about 1.8 million, you spent about 2.8, which is about a deficit of $1 million.
And could we just, I hate to interrupt you, but could you just clarify what that culture and recreation expenditures, what does that all encompass?
Well, pretty much all of the expenses besides debt service and capital outlay. Capital outlay would be like equipment or repairs to a building or that sort of.
Is this more like staff, labor costs?
Yes.
And then anything that we've spent money on in terms of product, that type of thing? Is that-
Exactly, yep.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, no, we do have a grouping schedule, and I mean, if you look at this Iron Trail Motors Event Center fund in the accounting system at the city, you'll be able to tell exactly what it is. So it's kind of difficult because it is grouped all together, but it's labor, supplies, repairs, that sort of thing, it's all grouped in there.
And then when Sherry has sent that out for, I think we just got it, I think actually Lori sent it the last time, the last meeting we had. So thank you for that, I appreciate that. But how do we then go about, if we're going, thank you for answering that, appreciate it. How do we go about in examining each month and where we're at? And if we see that this deficit is going to start increasing to the point of where we've anticipated, say, $1 million deficit at the beginning of the year, we're going to transfer that in, but we're starting to see that gap of deficit happening. How do we put mechanisms in place to stop that from happening?
Sherry?
Council Mayor, I definitely would refer back to the city administrator in working with the department heads. And I just wanted to say, we budgeted to transfer in $1 million.
Right.
We did that last year, this year, and we're projecting for next year too. Because approximately $1 million used to be an expense in the general fund for the utility workers. And that, most of those utility workers have moved to the Iron Trail Event Center. So we just transferred that $1 million. That way we budgeted. It's the expenditures that go above and beyond your revenue and your budgeted expense. In that case, you get the monthly financials. I'd say be on top of that. And also too, the city administrator and I have been working with Brian and Jim and the sales and marketing. It's really important. I feel like we're playing a little bit of a catch-up because of change of staff over the last year. And so, yeah, we're trying to get it creative. It's not like we're just, this fell on us all of a sudden. We've been aware of this.
Thank you for that, Sherry. Thank you so much. And I think that's maybe the one question, the most pressing question that I did have regarding just some control mechanisms. And then when we hired 3 level 3 staff downstairs in the office, that was supposed to address our, segregation of duties. So in 2023, do you think that will change in the audit as the training happens and our staff get kind of up to speed with where they need for that separation of duty?
I believe so, and I think it's set up in place to do that. I would like to see the proof is in the pudding. So if going forward, we have the number of journal entries that we have this year, I would say something's lacking again. So the whole idea is to reduce the number of audit entries that you have and have a preparedness for the audit, and I'm talking just from the audit perspective. But as the records of the audit and adjustments go, so goes the accounting staff. So hopefully, that's the goal, and I think there's a good chance of it. I think it's a very qualified staff, and they're more than willing to learn, and I see a lot of positives on it. So I believe that's an accurate statement on your part,
Okay.
Counselor.
Great. And then just one last thing, if I may, Mayor. I'm not sure what page it's on, Greg, because we were going through and then I lost where I
Okay.
saved my note. But it was referencing, maybe it's the last page, it was referencing cash.
It's a page
Might have-
7,
Well, maybe it's on page 30 or 31 when it,
31, yeah, number 7.
oh, number 7, okay. Yeah, could you describe what that means? That, you mean cash has disappeared or not been accounted for, or?
I'm going to let Devin answer this because he did the cash again, but it's a really good question.
Yeah, so I've worked on reconciling cash for the past few years. Typically, when we come into audit, we like to see reconciliations done, no discrepancies or variances. I think just basically with the turnover, we had to do a little bit more with reconciling and helping reconcile. In no area did we see cash was missing. It was just having the reconciliations done timely. And I would say that like the general checking account, that's the biggest one, because that's where most of your cash is coming in and out. That one was reconciled and reviewed. It's more of the investments where you're booking like adjustments for fair market value and interest and that sort of thing. But in no area, if we did find missing cash, that would have been on the forefront of this audit for sure. But in no circumstance or no case this year did we find that like cash was missing.
So it was just a part of how you reconciled where the money went or where the funds went?
Yeah, it's just reconciling your bank statement to the civic accounting records.
And is there anything that you could recommend that we could do better to have a control mechanism on that portion?
I think it kind of sums it up with the training and getting that experience that's kind of been lost in those positions. And one thing that I see successful in our other clients when we have turnover is a substantial amount of training overlap, which that might have helped a little bit more to just understand how things are done. And that would help your staff in the future, I think, is just to have more overlap.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. I think, to sum it up, I think Sherry, you summed it up where, with the Iron Moise Event Center deficit, it's all about establishing additional revenue. And we need our marketing people to step up to the plate. They're starting to do that. Increasing the revenue is going to help reduce the deficit. So we have the expenditures that we all believe that they were justified moving forward, necessary to maintain that level, to get to the level we're providing the maintenance and all the amenities that somebody's going to need in order to rent that facility. It's the other part of it, it's the recommendation as far as being able to attract new revenue streams, more significant revenue streams in order to help offset that deficit. So we anticipate hopefully in the future that's going to happen with our new marketing director and our staff that's being administered by our Park and Rec Director, Brian Silber. Councilor Motley.
Hi, thanks again for presenting. I've never sat through on something like this before. So just to clarify, am I understanding this correctly, that the city of Virginia in 2022 was in a negative of $5,585,372? Page.
What page are you looking at?
59 on the bottom and 22 on top.
Okay. Page 59 on the bottom. Yeah, basically, this is governmental funds, fund balance, which is basically a budget, based on a budgeted year, not a full accrual. And your budget year basically is annual plus 60 days. So it's all the payables and receivables appropriate for the year. And at year end, all your governmental funds, unassigned bottom line, and you can see the deficits are in ambulance, Iron Trail, and the non-major funds. So the bottom line of unassigned, because in total, your fund balance is 11.8 million, as you can see on the bottom line on the right, on that page 59. But of that amount, you have non-spendable, certain funds are restricted, which end up, your net unassigned taken away from them funds. Just for example, to help you understand it, your ambulance special revenue fund has 517,000 deficit fund balance, but 23,000 is non-spendable and prepaid items. Therefore, your unassigned is 541. So in total, to get it to 517, you have a positive and a negative. So that's what ends up happening in all the various other funds, non-governmental and going across. So you're, if you have positive, like the other funds, 13 million restricted, that's a third column over, you can't have, the only way you get unassigned, normally unassigned is only in the general fund. Everything in your debt, your special revenue funds, capital project funds is either restricted or committed or assigned. But if you have, if you can't have a deficit restricted, so it ends up being, in total, you'll end up having a deficit unassigned in the other funds. Does that make sense? It's a little complicated.
It's actually so much, I had no idea until I got on the council, all this funding, and I mean, it's a learning experience, but.
Yes.
So then am I understanding this correctly, then the total, well, is it worse than 5 million?
No. So on page 22, if you want to see that on the fund financials, you turn to page 7 of the audit, or of the 17 on the bottom, page 7 on the handout. And that basically breaks down the fund balances on the bottom section where the non-spendable, restricted, unassigned, where everything is. So we still have the 11,831,000 in total fund balances, but of that, 5.5 million is net, total going across, unassigned. And it ends up, maybe you could say it's even an accounting issue, and maybe this might be more appropriate to talk to, I'd be more than happy to come in and try to discuss it one-on-one or whoever would want to. So, because you need to understand.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like we're going in the wrong direction. I see these numbers and it's blowing my mind, so.
Yeah, those numbers, and you are right, that, including general and all the funds, you don't want a deficit unassigned. That number should be positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I guess just to add, because I was at another city yesterday and I had the same conversation. The Office of the State Auditor recommends that unassigned fund balance, to have like your rainy day fund or a standard to kind of hit, is to keep 35 to 50% of your yearly expenditures in a fund as kind of the standard for what's left in your unassigned fund balance. So just on this page 7 up top and 17 down below, in your general fund, you have 346,000 as unassigned fund balance. 35% of what was spent out of the general fund last year would be about 5.4 million. So in order to sustain that rainy day fund, I mean, the general fund should be making more money and you should have more of a set aside to meet the Office of the State Auditor's standards. Or I shouldn't say standards, recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
benchmarks.
Benchmarks.
I don't know if this is for Sherry or somebody offhand, but are we losing more money right now at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center in 2022 than we did in 2021?
I just sent out the financials yesterday. They should be listed. Did you get it?
Did I get it?
Yeah, you should have gotten the monthly
I
financials
must not have
yesterday.
looked at it. I must not have looked at it. Can you reference offhand? Otherwise, I guess I could dig it up.
Okay, so
myself.
you're asking for this current year?
No, I'm asking 2022. Are we doing worse in 2022 from this audit than we did in 2021 on the
This
Iron
is
Trail?
22's audit.
Right, but are we worse now with the Iron Trail Motors Event Center than we
So
were?
you're
Are we
asking-
getting worse?
The building
from
didn't
the
open
year?
until September of '21.
Okay, so I guess we're not in a
This
full
is,
2
last year
years.
was our first full year of that building operating.
Okay, never mind, scratch
And then I
that.
do want to point out on page 7, at the very last line before that, total fund balance capital project funds is a negative $3,068,234. I know we keep focusing on the Iron Trail Motors Event Center, but you have to remember, we have some really big projects going on right now that we're waiting for funding to come back in. The Public Safety Center, the street projects, there's a lot happening, so that, all that 5 million is not necessarily related to the Iron Trail Motors Event Center. It is other things we've done, because this is a snapshot in time. At 12/31/2022, they cut off and they look at that information. They don't know that we have this USDA grant coming, we have all this other stuff coming to backfill some of these things.
Okay, thank you.
That's a key point.
Thank you, Britt. Thank you, Counselor Motley. Any other questions for our audit? We'll start left to right. We'll go to Counselor Freelieb and then over to Counselor Beyondich. Counselor Freelieb.
I think as a city council, we have to remain ambitious and optimistic to move this city forward and continue to progress in the manner that we have, to have facilities like we have with the Iron Trail Motors Event Center. The statement that I see on page 38 or 14, depending on how you're numbering your system, there's a statement that says the city anticipates that the deficits will be eliminated by future revenues or transfers from other funds. That's an optimistic statement that I think we need to abide by. And right from the outset of the initiation of the project of the Iron Trail Motors Event Center, we did receive thoroughly vetted information from like the Isaac Sports Group that indicated without question that we were going to be running in a deficit for a facility of this size and manner, for a city of this size and manner, for upwards of a decade or more, I believe, is what as I recall. So even though these numbers are concerning, they were anticipated, and there are options available to us, including a 1% sales tax, which is increasing in revenue, as you indicate, year after year, which we hope the economy strengthens and remains strong and continues to allow people to go out and buy things and gain us revenue for making up the deficit that we have. So even though this sounds upsetting, it's not as bad as it sounds, in my opinion. I hope you agree with that statement, and if you don't, I certainly would, request your recommendations and what we would need to do to continue to be optimistic. So that's what I have to say with regard to this. I don't want anybody to overreact to this from the council standpoint or from the city of Virginia, because this was an anticipated deficit, particularly for the Iron Trail Motors Event Center. And then I'd also like to mention, we're $500,000 in debt for the ambulance service. We send our ambulances far and wide across the northeastern region of the state, for which then we are reimbursing, we get minimal reimbursement for the costs that we incur to provide safety to the entire region. So I mean, that's something that we're gonna struggle to, make up for in many regards until some other options are available to be able to be reimbursed accordingly for the far and wide reaches that we have for the service that we provide. So there are some things that we're incurring that we really have no control over, the reality is. But we're providing services that are absolutely necessary beyond the public or the primary service area that they serve in Virginia. So in any event, my heart was pounding while we're listening to this, and I appreciate you letting us know that there are concerns that we need to, be addressing in the future, but I don't want anybody to overreact to this, because I think we're on course to remain ambitious and optimistic in the city of Virginia. And like Britt says, we do have other irons in the fire right now with our particularly ambitious, so it's not the time to backpedal, it's the time to keep moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Freelieb. Once again, before I go to Councilor Beyondich, the Iron Trail Motors events are just one aspect of this. Yes, we anticipate the operation as a deficit for a period of time, but there's two different things here. There's paying off the debt with respect to the construction costs and making sure that we have established enough revenue stream to operate the facility, and that's where we're focusing on. We have the sales tax, paying those bonds off, and that's moving forward. That's a positive revenue stream there, but it's the operating costs, and that's, I think, where the deficit was concerning, how it's going to be cost us to operate the facility. And by improving our revenue stream moving forward, I think in 2023 you'll see that improvement. And thank you, Councilor Freelieb, for that optimistic perspective. Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. And thank you for coming in.
And yes, my heart dropped when I saw some of these numbers. But I do also want to remind the council that we are part of this process, and we have to work together to bring this down and make it work. I would really like to see this packet come out to us maybe 2 weeks before we have you come in, because I'm with you, Counselor Motley. I need to really digest what's going on and what I see here. And I'm hoping that the new system that got put into the Iron Trail Motors Event Center that is being used to track inventory from, point of sale items, that will play into this a little bit. But I think as a council, we need to be very diligent on working on this. And it's a large task for Britt and Sherry to work on. But as a council, where we sit, we are also part of this. We approve things that are going through, and when I see these numbers, that concerns me. So I will probably have further questions, and I don't know if I can reach out to you at all. I need time to go and digest all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. We're right in town here, and we'll do whatever we need to help everybody out.
Okay, thank you so much.
More than happy to do that.
Thank you. I would love to come sit down and go through these a little bit more.
Absolutely, whether we sit in an admin office or have the people, or whatever we need to do.
Right. And I know I've brought up here that I think we should have some type of a finance where we can sit and work on, get all of our questions answered and understand what, as a city, we are doing moving forward with taxpayer dollars. Thank you.
And I do agree, as city staff, mayor, and councilors, you must know this information. Not only this, you need to know, you must know.
Thank you. I'm trying to understand it as we go, and when I saw this come through yesterday, I thought, I need more time.
There's nothing easy about this.
Correct. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Biondi. Thank you, Greg. Any other questions, comments, or concerns that anybody has at this point in time? Just another reminder that we have this financial audit, just as a snapshot that's presented. Any additional questions, comments, or concerns, we could certainly, as an individual, as a group, reach out again to your firm in order to help answer the questions that I have moving forward. So thanks for coming in. Thanks for doing all the hard work moving forward. And I just want to say before you leave, our staff has been working very hard to provide the information that you need. They do have the expertise and the knowledge with respect to that. So I think we're providing as much information as we can with respect to the budget. And so we hope that in 2023, when you come back, you'll see some significant improvements in all areas, from the deficit all the way to the separation of the duties or of concerns to you. So looking at other cities' audits, we're not an anomaly here. There are others that are in the same boat or worse. So I don't say worse, but moving forward. So who? Councilor Paulson, you have a question before we move on to the next item on the agenda?
Actually, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to.
Sure, please make a
bring
motion.
forward to the council. I'd like to make a motion that we add to our committee of the whole a review of every time Sherry sends the monthly financials out, that we actually add that as a line item for review under finance of our committee of the whole meetings.
Okay.
Would be once a month.
Yeah, repeat the motion one more time.
To add, to add a discussion item under finance, once a month at, which committee of the whole would it be? The second? The second committee of the whole,
Sure, okay.
to go over the monthly financials that Sherry sends out to us.
Very good. So that's a motion to set a line item under finance for financial review of the monthly statements to be held at the second committee of the whole meeting each month. Is there support for that?
Support.
By Councilor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing, I'm sorry, Councilor Beyondich.
Sorry. Would it be too much to ask if we compile questions that you could come before us again to answer them?
Yeah, that's appropriate, and that will give us a little chance to research something if we have to, or make sure get you the not only the right information, the correct information back, so make it as most useful as possible.
Thank you. So, Counselor Paulson, after we have this first one, that we go through finances, at that time, could we invite them back to, we could write down our questions at that time and have them come back to a meeting?
Yeah, we can do that, absolutely.
Thank you.
So it has been moved and supported to set as a special light item at the second committee of the whole meeting to review the monthly financial statements. Once reviewed, if there's any other questions or concerns or comments and we need some more information, we'll reach out to our auditor to provide and answer those questions for us. Is moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Any other questions for our auditors, so before we move on to the next item on the agenda? Councilor Frieden.
Just one last comment. I want to thank Lori and Brianna, Sherry, Britt, for assisting us in keeping the city of Virginia from imploding budgetarily and financially. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Frieden. Yeah, I think we all agree with that. So, okay, thanks again. Thank you, Mr. Segler. Thank you, Mr. Knutson, for coming in. Appreciate it very much.
My pleasure.
Okay, take care. Thanks again. Next item, please.
Thank you. Item number 3 on the agenda is review the request for an addendum to the Iron Trail Motors Event Center Fitness Facility Membership Agreement for the use of the fitness room by a private party to include placement of equipment. And we do have Brian Silber here from the Park and Rec Department.
So, please, Brian, if you want to come forward, would you please, Brian Silber, our Park Rec Director. Guess I'm curious to see who this is and what kind of equipment they want to bring in. And is it privately used, is for public use, or whatever the case may be. So, Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm looking for the page in your packet that we have this. Yep, it begins on, our current membership agreement begins on page 14. The addendum that we are proposing is on page 17. We have a potential customer, Living Well Physical Therapy, that wants to rent our gym space to essentially do some physical therapy and personal training for athletes. In doing that, they would like to add some equipment that would be available to them and to the public to use at no additional charge to us. So this seems like a very good opportunity for us to have some equipment added into the facility and gain a new customer, which could also result in us gaining additional fitness memberships.
So, quick question for clarity for me. Which room would they be using, and what kind of equipment would they be providing?
They are looking at using the room that's used for classes,
Okay.
Not the weight room, but the fitness room. The fitness room is the room that we rent out for $20 for a 2-hour class. That's 30 minutes for setup, an hour for the class, 30 minutes for cleanup. So we would be going that route typically with them. And they are looking at the possibility of adding a squat rack into the room.
Okay, thank you. So, have we worked out a potential use agreement with a cost attached to it, or the rental fee attached to it?
It would be our standard rental fee. It would depend on how often that they are renting the room. And this addendum essentially covers those things that we are wanting to change in order to meet the needs and desires of this client.
And then one last question, the liability with respect to the squat rack that comes in there. Somebody, if it's open to the general public to use, who's responsible for the maintenance, repairs, installation, and insurance with respect to that?
As far as liability for it goes, all of our customers do sign off on the assumption of risk, which minimizes our liability with it. But at the end of the day, we are liable for injuries when it comes to if we have done something negligent.
Thank you. So the second part of that question is, who maintains that piece of equipment under the agreement?
We don't have that outlined.
You will, okay, you'll have that for us, okay. Thank you, Brian. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So is it just thank you, Brian. Is it just the squat rack that they want to bring in, or is it?
That is correct.
Anything else that they were going to be?
Not at this point.
Okay. And is there enough room if the squat rack is there for that jump harness usage?
Oh, yes. It would not be near the jump harness. We've been kicking around the idea of, for those of you that know how the room's laid out, where we have the exercise bikes in that room right now, we've been looking at removing some of those exercise bikes from that room and doing some rearranging in the weight room to get those exercise bikes next to the recumbent bike and spin bike that we have, so that all of our bikes are in one area. We just have not been successful in coming up with a new layout for the weight room that doesn't make it too crowded at this point. So we're still working on that, but for me, getting all the bikes in one centralized location makes the most sense. Then the squat rack would go in that area there. So you could actually have the big open area for the classes. We do have, while we don't have classes, we've got a great group of members of the fitness facility that get together almost every morning and essentially do their own class. So we're not renting the room to them because they're already members and they just get together and work out every morning. We don't want to impede on that space, because if we impede too much on that space, then we're going to be minimizing any future class opportunities that we have.
Thank you for that. And then just the one last thing I had was, in terms of the liability and the maintenance, that's going to be discussed, or will they, or maybe Brian can weigh in, our city attorney, Brian, on what, if we did have equipment, because I think there was at one point talk with the youth hockey or whomever that they wanted to bring some Peloton equipment in or whatever at one point. Maybe that hasn't happened, but how does that work? If we're going to do this, how does the liability issue work?
Mayor, if I may?
Please.
Counselor, the answer to your question, to some extent at least, is governed by the proposal that's contained within the agenda packet. I've reviewed the proposed addendum to the membership agreement for the placement of the equipment. Basically, that agreement doesn't speak too well on the topic of maintenance issues, but it does speak very clearly on the issues of liability, and basically the city would assume the liability under this contract. I think as it relates the addendum that's been proposed, it may be worth going back. I understand we received this as a draft from them, so we may want to make, and looking through it, I would suggest we make some edits just to make it a little bit more friendly to the city. I think there's a real simple way to do it that's not going to upset the apple cart at all, or have an adverse effect on the conversations that are going on, or allowing this to happen. But there's just some things that we want to clarify and nail down.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And then one last, I'm sorry, Brian. So when I went on their website, they do other things too, like needling and things like that. Will they be using this space just for like the squat rack and maybe some physical therapy? Or will they be using it differently? Some of the aspects on their website that they do, cupping and needling, and they do some other type of activities.
I believe their long-range goal is to bring be able to utilize our facility for all of the services that they offer, which just means that they'd be using our facility more, which would be generating more revenue for our facility.
Okay, and so if that's the case, I would suggest that if they have those services, and I think, Brian, this is where I was getting at with liability and safe sport, that type of thing, if they are going to be doing something that requires disrobing, that it must be in a closed location. or I don't know how the city
Yeah.
will treat that, but, so if you go on their website, they do other things like, they do the cupping, and then they do it's called needling, dry needling, it's like acupuncture. So I just am concerned as to how that rolls out in.
One of the
public
things,
city
we would
space.
also be requiring them to list us as an additional insured on their insurance. They're obviously not going to want to do something like that out in public, so
I wouldn't think so.
as a client, a client's not going to want to be doing that in a room that has 6 windows that people can look in on, so
And I guess
hopefully
I would
common
say-
sense would come
I
into
would say,
play.
though, before we even go down that road, we may want to describe what things that the city is okay with, because now I'm thinking in my mind, that some of those other activities might not be appropriate usage in our building. Thank you.
Mayor, could I make just one comment?
Yes, please, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. So in looking at, and I've just received, Britt forwarded me a Word copy. This will make it really easy to mark up. I think a couple of the things that we want to do is we want to define some space where the equipment will be placed. But what makes me optimistic here is the language that they use is a softer language as far as a first proposal. It shows that, or at least my reading of it indicates to me that they'd be open to each party being responsible for their own activities and not being responsible for things that we don't have control of. And I think, to speak directly to your point, Counselor, I think the way that we could incorporate some of that language is to say, look, when you come on premises and engage in whatever the permitted activities are going to be, you're responsible for the natural result of those things. And so if your plan is to bring any additional activities, and we could define what permitted activities are within the addendum, but if you're going to bring in any of these other things, you must take appropriate precautions to make sure that your clients are protected, that nobody's exposed to any sort of adverse effects or exposed in any way, I suppose. And I think those things can all be simply incorporated into the contract.
Thank you, Brian. Counselor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I will make a motion to approve the addendum with the changes recommended by the city attorney for final approval on next Tuesday's meeting.
Motion by Counselor Johnson to approve the addendum to allow this to occur with some recommended changes to be proffered by our city attorney and presented to us for consideration at our next council meeting. Is there support?
Or for discussion.
Support by Counselor Freely for discussion. Further discussion? Counselor Freely.
So Brian, you're confident that this private entity coming to utilize a public facility will not impose on the utilization by the public and the scheduling that you have that would accommodate that?
Correct. They're looking at essentially our downtimes that they would be utilizing the facility.
And it's primarily limited at this point in time, according to them, to athletic performance services and Pilates exercise classes.
Correct.
And it's another source of revenue that would be beneficial to us having housed in our facility.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Freely. So it has been moved and supported. Further discussion? Counselor Beyondich.
So I just question is, we have Iron Range Rehab here that does physical therapy. That is, I mean, this, for $20 for a 2-hour block of time and not knowing how much as things progress, this is a pretty inexpensive rental that is doing the same thing or very similar to our Iron Range Rehab Center. So that kind of concerns me what direction we're going in. This is a $20 for a 2-hour block of time that our staff takes care of the room. And we have a rehab center here that has their own facility. So I just want to be real careful where we're going as far as rental for this type of thing. I've always been, when we have a business here in town, I think we need to look out for that a little bit as well. And this is $20 for a 2-hour block for what they're doing. I don't know, that's a lot of revenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Beyondich. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? We could add that to that discussion with the addendum as well. I'll take a look at the fee schedule as well. Counselor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. We set that $20 fee in this room, so if that's a problem, we set it because we had a bunch of people come to us and have multiple meetings with us about how terrible it is that we want to charge so much for that space. I don't think it's our job to regulate. Obviously, this is a local business. They want to perform the business in our town. Iron Range Rehab is owned and operated by Essentia. I think there's so many layers of stuff that we shouldn't be worrying about, insurance coverage. I think this is a different service. I think this is a different opportunity for people who may not have insurance or may not be able to afford Essentia's rates to do. I think this is another thing that we just spent an hour talking about, or how are we going to generate revenue for the Iron Trail Motors Event Center. This is the first step. Let's get people in there who can use this space instead of it being empty. It's going to be cleaned whether it's empty or not. It's going to be mopped whether it's empty or not. That's what the staff does there. So I think this is a great opportunity, and if the rate is too low, then that's the discussion this committee needs to have a discussion on, and raise the rate for everybody, not just because one person wants to do a business. The 2-hour block is a half-hour setup, an hour's class, and a half-hour cleanup. At least that's what the intention is. Now, if this person can get a 10-minute cleanup and setup and have longer classes, good for them. It's none of my business. If they're renting it, it's up to them to use the space appropriately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It has been moved and supported, and once we get through this, we'll go to item 4 on the agenda, then we'll take a quick break. Is there any further discussion about this particular addendum? Counselor Motley?
Just a quick question. How many people or groups rent this room? Average?
In the past 3 months, I can think of 3 different groups or individuals that have rented the room. That does not include our figure skating program that also utilizes the room for the off-ice jump harness.
Okay. Another thing I noticed in this draft here, they want to hang a banner above the room, inside, outside, and/or both. I don't know what I think about that either, considering there's other people renting it, unless they started renting it 5 days a week, umpteen hours a day. I don't know, it seems like we charge everybody to hang something or whatever, and then we would just give it to them for free for $20 for 2 hours. We don't know how many hours they're even committing to in a week.
I believe the banner was just to be making people aware that they were in the building, utilizing our building, so.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor Motley. It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
No.
Motion, roll call, please, Pam.
Friedlieb,
Aye.
Paulson,
No.
Beyondich,
No.
Johnson,
Yes.
Aaronzelli. Yes. Cuffey,
Aye.
Motley.
No.
3 to 4. It pass? Passes 4 to 3. Thank you. Next item.
Thank you. The next item is for Brian also, request to allow staff to begin negotiations with the junior hockey franchise team for the use of the Iron Trail Motors Event Center.
Brian?
Without divulging too much information, thanks to the efforts of our sales and marketing team, we have been approached by a junior hockey franchise that is interested in having discussions with us on what a long-term lease would look like. So before we have anything other than a tour of the building, which we've already done, would like to seek council's permission to begin discussing with them what a long-term lease would look like with a junior hockey franchise.
So the request today is to just give you the authority to enter into negotiations and determine the feasibility of a hockey franchise. So looking for council action, council questions or concerns?
I'll move to approve.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, we have three, I think. Okay, Councilor Paulson moves to approve. Is there support?
Support.
By Councilor Freely. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries.
Did you want to take a break, Mayor?
Yeah, let's take 5 minutes. Take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay, we'll reconvene the council meeting after taking a short break. And we'll just wait for Councilor Johnson and Councilor Motley to return, and then we'll move to item number 5 on the agenda under finances. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We have all councilors present. Britt, would you move to the next item on the agenda, please?
Yes, item number 5 is discuss the updated PACE contract for the wastewater treatment plant testing.
Okay, do we get our questions resolved? What you said, Pam?
Thank you, Mayor. So just to recap what happened, we did work with PACE and Nathan Boberg, and Paul Christensen and I kind of been emailing back and forth to review the contract. So they did change the pricing from what it was, and they basically cut everything down about 25%. And then they also cut the sample disposal from 6 to 3, and the environmental impact invoice charge from 25 to 10. So this is something new that they implemented with their contracts. And then, yes, this morning he did email me and say that they will waive the minimum lab fee, which I believe was at 100 or 125. So they will waive that. So that is just an updated on there as well. So I guess it's up to the council. Don't really have a lot of options unless we maybe go to Hibbing or Duluth for testing.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. With the change in the numbers, are they, how much more, what is the percentage from last year to this year that it would have gone up?
They reduced about 25%.
From last year, or from what they proposed?
Or I should say increased about 25%, yeah. So the one test, have the exact test information. I know it was like $63 and then they decreased it. It might be the first one on there, the oxygen. Might have went to 35.
And is this more in line with what the others also propose?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Well, I still think that this is, I think they need to come and explain it. I think they have to come here, tell us at the committee meeting or at the next council meeting, before we accept this thing, the adjustments they made, give us a justification for the 25% increase and why they asked for a heck of a lot more, and now they're making a reduction. So I think they have to come to this and explain this to us. That's my perspective. So, Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I would agree with you.
Thank you.
And I would make that motion to direct city staff to invite them to meet with us at the next committee of the whole.
Support.
Okay, moved by Councilor Freely, been supported by Councilor Beyondich to invite, who would it be? Pace Analytical to come to the next committee of the whole meeting and to explain the contract moving forward. So is there any other discussion? Councilor Johnson.
When does this contract need to be renewed by?
It expired in June. So
Okay.
we're still working.
So we're
But
still
I believe
doing-
they're honoring the pricing. And they have it dated, I believe, August 11th was one of the questions that another gal had asked, Melissa Hogfeld. So basically, I think it would have started on October 11th or whenever we approved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Johnson. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries.
Item number 6 is approve the purchase of Water FX 300 for the wastewater treatment plant at a cost of $42,200.
I'll make a motion to, I'll make a motion to consider this purchase, but if I recall, we got it shipped to us for less than $8,000 the last time. How often do we buy this? We just bought this not that long back, didn't we?
Pam?
Mayor, they are no longer reducing that shipping fee after our last shipment. And I would have to look back and see.
And yeah, so I mean, is this like every 6 months or is it once a year? It seems like this wasn't that long ago that we ordered this. Or is this the same order? It's a new one.
It's a new one. Well, maybe they should come explain that as well.
This is the phosphorus reduction. So the amount of volume that we use depends on the volume that's being put into it. So if we have a lot of sewage usage, we're going to use a lot of chemical. And there's also some things that they're identifying at the plant that there might be some filter changes or some other things we might need to do next year that we're trying to budget for that might help us reduce the amount of chemical we need to use because we seem to be using a lot of chemical.
Well, unfortunately, this is an item that is necessary for the operation of the facility, so I guess I move this forward.
Okay, Counselor Freely moves to approve item number 6, the purchase of the Water FX 300 for the wastewater treatment plant. It's $42,200, supported by Counselor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Beyondich.
Is this the only place you can purchase this from?
Yes. It was an experimental treatment we tried a few years ago, if you recall. And this was an experimental chemical that we got permission from the state to use for the phosphorus reduction.
Okay, thank you. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there a way that we can get quotes for our own shipping? And is it on a tanker? It's a bulk tanker load. Could we get an estimate for, I don't know if we have that ability to find somebody, but
We can try.
we might want to do that and just see if we can save some money on that. Thank you.
Yeah, we get this shipment every 3 months.
Thank you, Mayor. So is it $8,000 every time? So every 3 months, we're spending $24,000 on shipping?
Each shipment.
I mean, every
Shipment.
Each shipment is a delivery charge.
32,000, sorry, per year. Just to ship. Is there a company
I believe it
that we
was
could?
6,000 the first time, and no, the last time was 8, and then this is 8.
Where is it being shipped from? Macedonia, Ohio?
Yeah, Ohio is where it's coming from.
So maybe could we find and just maybe get shipping quotes from,
And then shipping charges, if you read on here, our bill is actual, so that's the estimate is $8,000. Depends on what it actually is that day. So it may not be $8,000 when they deliver it if gas prices are in our favor or if they're coming from something else.
and then on this experimental that we were approved, I thought there was grant funding for that.
For that first experiment, yes, but now this is our process. We put in our permit that we're going to use this stuff to treat the water. Now
So
we
there's
have to do
nothing
it.
to offset that even though we were,
That's the discussion that they were working on before Paul Moe transferred to a different plant. They were working on figuring out a capital improvement cost that might reduce the amount of chemical we need. They're still working on that, and so they did let us know they want us to budget some money next year to do that because they think we can reduce the amount of chemical we're using.
Thank you for that, Britt.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Counselor Paulson has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor.
I'm sorry, Counselor Johnson's here later on. Go ahead.
Thank you. I would make a motion to direct staff to see if there are alternative shipping methods available for this.
Support.
Okay, well, moved by Counselor Johnson, supported by Counselor Freelieb to direct staff to determine if there are any additional shipping opportunities for us with respect to this product. Is there any further discussion? Pam?
Just going back to the email from Carol Ross, who works for People Service, noted that they need the chemical in about 3 weeks, which was August 2nd and the last time it took a few weeks to get, so they need it right away.
Thank you for that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 7 is appointment of team leader for Public Works Department.
Okay, thank you.
I'll move the recommendation forward for these team leaders.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Freely moves to approve of the appointment of the team leaders for the park and for the Public Works. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Counselor Motley. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Item number 8 is approve the 2023 transient merchant license for Erica Sundberg doing business as Buns to Go.
So moved.
Move to approve by Counselor Motley. Is there support? By Counselor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
There's a request to hold the 3rd annual Range Recovery Night Out on Tuesday, September 12th, 2023, from 4 to 7 p.m. at Alcott Park.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Johnson. Is there support by Counselor Motley and Counselor Paulson and everybody else? Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Back on your desk is the tobacco ordinance, Chapter 6, Section 6.33. I do believe that because we are including marijuana, we have to have a public hearing with the new state statute, so we need to set a date for that. And then I have heard from some business owners that they're a little upset about the tobacco smoking, not marijuana smoking, the tobacco smoking on the sidewalks. As a suggestion, when I spoke to the mayor about this, that maybe we put or in designated areas or something like that where we can designate whoever, us or them or whatever, designate where smoking occurs. And I'm just conveying that information to you. I'm sure that'll come up in the public hearing as well.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you can't ban smoking everywhere in the city, on every city piece of property, sidewalk, or street. Doesn't make any sense because business owners, so it's except in designated areas, and we'll be able to change the ordinance to designate that as we move forward with the ordinance and having the public hearing with respect to and hearing from people who are adversely affected by that. We can set some limits, but we also have to have some flexibility here as well. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I had asked, I think at during our last conversation, could they be treated as 2 different substances? And can they be, according to the law that is now on the books in Minnesota, can they be, because what you were saying before, Brian, is that it was falling under our tobacco ordinance, and then we realized we didn't necessarily have the correct ordinance that we needed. So now in doing this, could you separate those 2 products, or is that pitting one product against another product?
Well, right now, the law says you can't smoke marijuana in any public street or in public in any way, shape, or form. Brian?
Mayor, if I may, the specific answer to the question is yes. The 2 substances can be treated independently because obviously, well, both have an effect on your system. The effect of marijuana is more dramatic, and I think that's a reasonable basis to include it as part of a different set of regulations.
So we could keep that as part of the tobacco ordinance and just stipulate, or is that a different track because it's a different substance.
Brian?
If we're going to say we're not going to be allowed to smoke that on in our public streets or parks, what have you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Brian?
We could, there's a number of different ways to tackle this question. We could include it as a separate subdivision within the ordinance that prohibits smoking. We could treat it by an independent and newly created section of the code. It may be easier just to fit it into the existing and have a separate subdivision where you would have, tobacco smoking prohibitions, cannabis smoking prohibitions, and have it as two separate subdivisions.
And then are we under the obligation of putting a designated area together or for marijuana usage? Because I would rather not have it be like a tobacco in a designated area. I would rather have it blanket that it's not going to be allowed.
Well, that's what
On
the
city.
statute says right now, is you can't smoke it anywhere in public, but, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the city's not under an obligation to create any designated spaces. Even if we make an allowance for designated spaces, we're not we're not required to designate those spaces. We can have an application process where folks can make application. There's a number of different things we can do there, but we're not under any obligation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Paulson. So we need to set a hearing date, correct? Okay. What would you suggest? 2 weeks, 3 weeks, month from now? Is there a specific date that you had in mind to set a public hearing? We have to set it once we... So we could have a public hearing the first meeting of September, and that would be at what time? 5 o'clock on September 1st? When is that then? September the 12th? Is that acceptable to everybody? We'd have that hearing at 5 PM on Tuesday, September the 12th. Councilor Johnson?
Would it be appropriate, I'm just trying to think out loud here, could we not have it during the committee of the whole meeting, as it's probably business owners that would want to come and it would be during their workday, and then we can get this moving along a little quicker? I would be okay with the next committee of the whole meeting. That would give us plenty of time. The August, September 5th, yeah.
Sure, whatever you want. Make a motion and we'll go with that one.
I'll make a motion to set the public meeting for 9:01 or 9 o'clock on the September 5th.
Okay, Councilor Johnson makes a motion to set a public hearing for the tobacco ordinance for 9 a.m. Tuesday, September 5th. Is there support? Is there support?
I just have one question.
Pam?
So it's 14 days after we have the first reading. So it won't fall then on our regular scheduled council meeting, correct?
Right.
It's going to be off a week.
Right.
So we'd have to do, then the committee of the whole, we'd be doing the second reading, but then it's officially not done until the next council meeting.
Well, it not only affects business, it affects the general public, it affects residents, it affects customers, it affects everybody, so. Well, that's the motion, so. Is it moved and supported? Is it moved and supported? It's been moved but not supported. There's a motion on the floor to move it to 9 a.m. Tuesday, September 5th, to have the public hearing regarding the tobacco ordinance, looking for support.
I would support that. I don't know why we wouldn't be supporting that. We need to have a public hearing. What's the holdup on this? I don't get it.
There'll be another week delay. Once we make the approval in the public hearing, it's a 14 days for it to publish. Then we approve it at the council meeting. So if we do it at a committee of whole meeting, we publish for 14 days. We're going to miss that council meeting, so we'd have to do it at the following council meeting, right? So it'll be a week
Unless we
delay.
set a
That's-
special meeting for the day of the committee of the whole meeting.
Pardon?
Unless we set a special meeting.
Yeah, unless we have a special meeting, which we could do, so. Is there
I
support?
support for discussion.
Okay, Counselor Freely supports for discussion now. Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Counselor Johnson to set the public hearing for the tobacco ordinance for Tuesday, September 5th at 9 a.m. It's been supported for discussion by Counselor Freely. Is there further discussion, Counselor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. I would have supported this. We definitely need to do it, but I feel like 9 AM is not the greatest time for the general public. So I'd like to see it at 5 PM. And, I mean, the date doesn't matter to me. It just, I would like to see it at 5 PM. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else have any discussion with the motion on the floor and support? Counselor Motley.
What day were you, I can tell, like, is there a day that you thought might be more beneficial to move things along faster?
Mayor?
Yes, Pam?
Well, I have to have a 10-day notice to get it in the paper, so we can't have it ready for the next council meeting, so it wouldn't be until September. So if we brought it up at the public hearing, could we do the public hearing on the 6th? Or not the 6th? The 5th? And then the first reading, the first reading would be the 12th, and then 2 weeks later. So it actually would not still get approved till the 26th then. Because there has to be 14 days in between the first and the second reading.
Okay, so the 5th is kind of where we're at. Question being then, are we just starting the committee of the whole later that day then? Because the 5th is unless I'm reading this, the 5th is a Tuesday, our committee of the whole is at 9. We're doing a public hearing at 9, are we just booting the committee of the whole later in the day?
The committee.
Correct, it would just
The committee
follow.
will immediately follow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so. Okay, the motion on the floor is to have it on 9 a.m., the 5th of September, a public hearing. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Beyondich.
Would it be possible to just do a quick meeting on the 29th so we could get that process going? I mean, I'm looking at Pam as for time-wise.
You would still have to have a first reading. So, I mean, if we can't really do it at the committee of the whole, right? Because then that isn't official, so you'd have to set a special meeting at the same day as the committee of the whole to do the first reading, because your committee of the whole meetings aren't official until the council meeting, your motions. So we're still looking at.
We did the public hearing on the 29th. We could have a special council meeting on the 5th to do the first reading.
Correct.
If we so choose, or else we do the public hearing the 29th, do the first reading the 12th, and the final reading the 26th. So by the end of the month, we would have an ordinance ready to publish.
Just, if I might, Mayor, just for FYI, I'll be out of town on the 29th. Just kind of letting you know
Pardon?
that. I'll be out of town on the 29th.
Yeah.
If we're considering that date.
Well, that would have to be a different motion because right now the motion on the floor is to set the public hearing for 9 a.m. on Tuesday, September 5th. So it has been moved and supported for that. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll figure it out after that. So, all right.
Can I add to that discussion just for a brief comment?
Sure, Councilor Freely.
You know, I do have a sister that lives in Colorado who claims that she rarely, well, I guess what I'm saying is like marijuana has been publicly legalized, but I think intended for private utilization. And I think that's the direction I would like to see this city go, is that you're allowed and legally to possess it, but not legally allowed to impose it on everybody and or anything around you. So that's the direction I'd like to see the city go. Now, whether we can separate the two, items or not, but that's what I think would be most benefiting this city, is that you can have this stuff and use it privately out of the breathing atmosphere of anybody that would be imposed upon. So that remains to be discussed, I guess.
Yeah, we're following a state law which doesn't allow smoking in public. You can eat it, you can have brownies, you can have gummies, you can do all that good stuff, but you can't smoke it in the public. That's the law in Minnesota. It's also law in other states, and it's completely disregarded. So that's bodes for additional conversation. So anything else? Do we vote on that? We did? Yes. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, Britt?
Item number 7 is review ordinance, Chapter 7, Streets and Sidewalks, and then Chapter 17, Property Maintenance and Preservation Code, and this is a request from Councilor Beyondich.
Yeah, Councilor Beyondich brought that up, so go ahead.
Thank you. I think and I know it's going to take a little bit of time, but I think we need to go through this just to understand. I mean, I went through and I highlighted an awful lot. And my question is, I mean, as I look at this, parts of both of these, the Property Maintenance and Preservation Code encompassed a lot of what we worked so hard on for our rental code. A lot of it is just duplicating. And as I read through this, a couple things stood out to me. Number one, the city does have its own issues with some of these items that are in this packet. Who is responsible for doing, who ultimately looks at this? And I'll go back to that blight. I had a gentleman come in and talk to me. People are afraid to turn in blight. And that's part of why our town looks the way it does. They're afraid of having to go to court, give a name, and be on that block or in that neighborhood. So I've been turning it in, and I'm happy to do that. I walk, I see it. Whose job is that?
Light officer.
So if I can walk my dog around town and I see it, who looks at it? I mean, does the blight officer go out and drive the streets and look at what is going on? I know there's property in Midway that the mayor has brought up several times. And I know there are things we have to follow. I understand that. I just don't see, I mean, I feel bad. When I walk, I'm looking around going, what are we doing? We have this in place. And I don't see it being followed through. I don't see, and I keep going further up, okay. So who directs the blight officer? Is the blight officer supposed to do this? I should pull job descriptions to look at what exactly does that job requirement have?
Todd Toman's place. That's the process that we went through with Todd Toman. That's how long it takes for us to remove a vehicle from a property.
And I understand
And that is the frustrating part. And so if they don't pick their mail up or they don't live there and there's something on their property, we have to go to court. And it takes literally that long to get it done. So it's not that the blight officer's not doing anything. I mean, she also has to mow every city property that we own that's vacant, which is a lot. I mean, so there's a lot of places she's got to do stuff. She goes up and down the alleys and picks up stuff next to the garbage cans. She's picking up, I have Scott here to kind of talk about this too. So they are doing a lot. It is a frustrating process. And so the question is, you keep mentioning these properties, but you haven't asked, has the notices been sent? Yes, everything you've given me, the notices have been sent. They've been addressed, they've been looked at, notices are sent. Takes time for the mail to get there, takes time for the mail to get back. We have to give them 10 days from the date they receive it to get the correction done. So it does take time. And I really appreciate you making those complaints for those residents that are nervous to do it. That's perfectly within your purview, of anybody's purview. Any citizen can make a complaint about anything. You don't have to be the neighbor. You can be anybody. You see it, you report it. Not a problem. But it does take time. And then eventually, if they're really hard, like the ones in Midway, the one that we're talking about, we have gone to court with him. And we're still going to court with him. We're going to keep going to court with him. It just takes time. Because, and there's also employee safety. There is some that we escalate automatically right to that point because they've made death threats to our employees. So this is a job that is, you have to balance those things.
And I totally understand that, and we've had discussions on this. I understand there is a process. My question is it even started?
Yeah, oh, yes, it goes on every single day. Every single day something goes out, yes.
So the properties that look the way that the ones I've
She
turned in.
can't be she only works 8 hours. And if she's doing mattress pickup that day, she's not looking around at all the different garbage cans. We have to take a picture and do an affidavit for every single property. So it's not as easy as texting me saying, here's the number. I then have to call her and tell her to go out and do an affidavit and do the pictures and do the thing. And if she gets there and the car that you mentioned is gone, there's nothing she can do. She can't cite them for something that's not there.
Right, and I understand that. Go ahead, Scott.
Hello, everybody. I'm just here to answer any questions that you need to do, and Britt has exactly said what needs to be done. And I can refer to the individual in Midway. I don't know who it is, but I'm pretty sure I know who it is. He has openly threatened our blight officer on social media and everything else. And I know this guy personally, and he's one scary guy. And we've said that all along. It's prohibiting us from plowing that particular area because of the stuff that's impeding out in the street. And I know the police officers have been involved numerous times. And our blight officer runs around and she takes pictures of everything, and we've got police officers involved. Last week, we just had one where the individual was turned in by a neighbor unanimously for outdated plates. The blight officer showed up and the car was gone. So we had no proof of what was going on. That's the sad thing about it is. But she is doing her job every day, and we all help her do her job. Some students help her do her job, and when she's gone, somebody steps up and does the job, for sure.
And I appreciate all of that. And like I said, when I read through both of these, I was surprised at how much is in here. There are a few places I think we need to change or update. And that was more with the skateboards and the things on the sidewalk, because now we do have four-wheelers, all-terrain vehicles, golf carts freely up and down sidewalks. So I was hoping we could go through these so we're all aware of it, aware of the process. And I know I've talked to you several times on some of the places that have been turned in. And I totally understand that it takes time. I just don't want things to fall behind. And I'll use an example. My husband's classmate came back to town. He's been gone for a while. And he came back, he said, we have a 50th reunion next year. He said, what happened? What has happened? So, I take pride in the community I live in. I want it to look nice, and I just want us as a council and a body to be aware of what all of these ordinances, because had I read through and gone through this before, part of our rental, a lot of that is covered in the property maintenance and preservation code. So there were a few tweaks we could have made instead of starting again from ground zero, and that's when I look at the ordinances we've passed, I wonder often, we pass them, but is anything done with them? And that's kind of where my frustration comes. I have the book of all the ordinances, and I look at them, and it's just like these two that were pulled. These are the issues that we as a council have heard about. I've heard about it for the last 5 years, and we've tried to address. Are we passing more ordinances and kind of putting them in a book and putting them on a shelf and not going back to look at them? We have all the information in front of us, but have we read it? Do we understand it? And do we follow through on it? So that was my reason for putting this on. I get a lot of calls on blight. And when I tell them the number of rentals we have in this town, and what is going on and how we're trying to backtrack and do that. It just kind of hurt my heart when this person came back, and for a 50th class reunion, they're looking at it like, what do we have to show our classmates? So I keep kind of pushing this forward, that we need to keep on this. We need to hold people accountable for the way our town is looking. And we have the information right here. And I realize, I know how long it takes. I talked to the other gal that we finally have action on. And she couldn't believe that it took her 4 years. I've been on it for 2. So it's being persistent and following through on the ordinances that were created and why they're here. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to Councilor Johnson, I just want to see, we all get calls. I've been up to Midway 24 times on a variety of properties up there, the one particularly on the East Parkway. And yes, the police have been up there, we're trying to take action. It's the ordinance is there, it's the enforcement aspect of it. And home, there's only enough hours in the day for that blight officer to move forward, and it's overwhelming. Stacks of blight it's overwhelming to try to get that done. We need a dozen people to move around every day and take care of the blight. People are very frustrated. The citizens are frustrated. I know that Councilor Beyond you're frustrated. I'm frustrated, but you're doing the very best you can to get that accomplished. Bringing a loader down there, helping your staff going on there. The blight officer, I mean, it's an overwhelming job. It really is. And so moving all those mattresses and all those kind of things out of there, we have multi-unit garbage containers. I mean, you go on and on and on. You don't know who's putting this stuff in there, so you can't hold them accountable unless you actually see it happen. Brian's dealt with that in court. The bottom line is that we want our people our employees to be safe, but at the same time, we need to enforce these ordinances. And blight is one of the biggest problems that we have here. It has been for a while. It's getting, progressively worse in some areas, and so we're doing the best we can to accomplish that. So what do? If the ordinance is there, it's to be our ability to enforce them, that's all. So I have to give a shout out to our crew. They work really hard. And I know that Trish and her, they're constantly going all the time. So how we do that, it's up to us to make a determination as what we can do to help get that accomplished, because that department is overwhelmed. Councilor Johnson.
And that was going to be exactly my point. The 7 of us have the authority to create a blight department, hire a blight director, hire blight staff, hire all that stuff. We can do that, but we don't have unlimited resources. Maybe having a blight officer that keeps getting pulled to do other things throughout the week because somebody else is gone. Maybe there's something we need to look at in our staffing models about why that works and how that works. Maybe there needs to be 2 blight officer, whatever the terminology is. But we keep complaining about it and we keep saying things, but this body has taken zero action to help our blight officer do their job more effectively. If we need to look at a full-time blight officer and another person that does help, other than summer, because the other problem I see is we don't have winter helpers. We have summer helpers that go around and mow and do all that stuff, and then when school starts, when they run out of their shifts, we do nothing in the wintertime. There's nobody extra to shovel sidewalks of people who won't shovel their sidewalk or can't shovel their sidewalk. So we're not helping it in this room by just saying there's a problem. If we want to do it, let's fix it. Let's hire another person. It's going to cost more money, yes, but how else do we do it? We cannot get people to do what we want. What's blight to us may not be blight to somebody else. It's their collection, it's their yard, it's their garden, it's their raspberries. It's their right on their private property to do what they want. And that is why it's such a long process. So if we want to do something, we keep talking about stuff in the alleys. Well, let's do an alley pickup. Let's figure that out. Hibbing, I think Britt sent me an article or something, that Hibbing does a combination of staff and volunteer drivers, and it's a whole coordinated effort where the city does their part, and then people have the ability to contact folks who are willing to volunteer to help move some of the bigger stuff. So there are solutions to this. We just need to take a step forward to make that happen. That the staff can go on a Saturday and we let people dump stuff off yes, it costs money. The blight is going to cost us money to clean up, but we can't do it with what we have. I think that's obvious, that the staff in Public Works are doing the best they can with what they have, and in planning, we need to give them more. I don't know what that looks like. I don't have a solution off the top of my head, but I think we need to ask them what they think would be in a perfect world with no restrictions. Let's get some big ideas, some out-of-the-box thinking, and then let's bring it together and figure out what's actually practical and a good solution for our city for now, because it's going to change. It's going to change. If we could train folks to cut up a box or smush a box, our dumpsters would be half full instead of completely overflowing. People throw away boxes empty, and that's taking up cubic feet of space that people could be putting garbage bags in. So it's a huge problem that we need to find a solution to, and I would like us to start that process. And if I need to make a motion to direct staff to start looking at creative ways to solve the long-term blight problem, which may include additional staff, I will do, and that'll be my motion, Pam, if you didn't get it. We need to figure something out other than sitting here and, it's very frustrating that my neighbor doesn't mow their lawn the summer's been okay, but, my neighbor has 4 cars parked in their backyard. They're all licensed and covered and taken care of. Do I like it? No. So I let my trees grow, so I don't have to look at it. That's how I solve that problem. So my motion, Pam, is to direct city staff to start working with all of the staff on creative solutions to fight and control blight.
Motion by Counselor Johnson. Is there support for that? Is there support?
Well, support for discussion, because
Support by Counselor Freely for discussion. First of all, Counselor Freely, and then Sherry has a comment. Counselor Freely.
yeah, I guess, Steve, I'm anticipating that all of that is well underway. I mean, that's a perpetual thing that's happening in this city to, engage these issues that arise. And it's frustrating. I mean, the reality is we have too much to do with not the necessary resources to do that. Can we clean up this city? That's the goal. Are we cleaning this city? Yes, we are, piece by piece, little by little. And I think there needs to be additional communications, which I would suggest, neighborhood task force. I see you haven't mowed your lawn. I'll come do it for you. Do you need me to do it for you? Or whatever. I mean, there's other means by which we can communicate. There are some, like in Midway, that you're not going to get to, no matter how many times you pound your head against a brick wall. I understand that. But there are those that we will make progress on, inch by inch, property by property. Will it be visible to the entire community? Minimally, it really is. I mean, even people say, like, we have a toothless grin on downtown Chestnut Street, on not recognizing there's been hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in downtown Virginia for new windows, new awnings, new roofs, new siding, new whatever. But unless you were aware of what it looked like prior to going downtown, you're not even aware of what it looked like. So in any event, the other thing is too, like I got caught on the street the other day. Somebody know that I'm street and alley commissioner or whatever. When are you going to do something about the streets and alleys in this town? And I said, there's lots of things being done. We're just a couple years behind. Couple years behind? You're 20 years behind, he says to me. And I didn't have it in my pocket to say, but it's like, Southern Drive's underway, 3rd Street's completed, 8th Avenue's been done, 12th Avenue's been done. I mean, I could click them off. Like, there's lots being done. It just isn't that pothole outside of his garage apron that's been taken care of. And it blows his mind, which means nothing's being done. Lots is being done. And lots is being done to try and curtail the blight in this city. It doesn't look like we're being successful, but we're making every effort to be cleaning up this city towards the ultimate goal of cleaning it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Sherry, do you have something to share with us?
I do. Councilors, Mayor. Communication is important, and a few weeks back, we did meet with the blight officer and Scott and Britt, and seems the biggest thing is time, and everybody's agreed, we're lacking time and staff. So I do have a solution, Counselor Johnson. That is, we get our proper tools in the toolbox for our blight officer. She needs a dump trailer. So she's not double handling. Have you ever moved a mattress before? Let alone a king size one or, yeah.
A wet one. It's been sitting in the alley
Yeah.
for 4 days.
And, she needs to free up time. So why double handle something that huge? I mean, I recall the former blight officer, Al, we jokingly said his truck had bumper pads in it because he had constant mattresses. So I'm just saying a dump trailer where her and her staff could get the job done probably in, maybe not quite half the time, but definitely would help not double handling it. And Scott, help me out here. You are going to get some quotes.
Yes, I talked to Tommy Hord yesterday. He's actually on the process of doing that right now. I used a dump trailer last week, and that's the first thing I thought of was, boy, that would be nice. And last Friday, we came to work, and Trish was on vacation at the particular time, so I talked to a student, and we went and picked up a mattress, and it had rained the night before. And we loaded it in the back of the truck, which is a pain in the rear end, and then we went back to the shop, put it in a loader, and then I dumped it into the bin that we have at the shop. And that's the thing too, is we have that big bin at the shop, and I bet you they're dang near emptying that every 2 weeks, because we're filling it with blight. I went down the street the other day, and there was a couch that appeared, and there was a chair that was there, and I'm like, it's insane what's going on right now. But we spent probably 45 minutes, went down 2 alleys, and we filled that pickup truck up with stuff. And the problem we're having also with blight is if people come out to the garbage can, and their garbage can where they normally dump, they throw their garbage in. If that can is full, they won't walk 30 feet down to the next one and throw it in that can. They'll throw it at the base of the can. And then pretty soon you got them around there like little soldiers, garbage bags. And it's like, drives us crazy as garbage truck drivers, because it's like, are you serious? That's another problem that we have, is people just need to clean up after themselves also. It's a simple task. Bed springs and that, we're not going to alleviate that problem because people will just do it. But garbage bags, that's another situation. But it is. I've been on the garbage truck actually quite a bit lately, and I've noticed it also. We're trying. We are. I think I spent more time getting out of the truck than I sat in the truck. It's just one of them deals. So we have garbage truck drivers that are doing it. We have blight officers that are doing it. We're all doing it just to clean the city up. Because not only does it reflect on you guys, it reflects on us, and we don't want that either. We want a clean city just like everybody else does.
8 text messages so far about this discussion. So, people are concerned.
Oh, yes.
So we do have a motion on the floor in a second to have staff figure it out. Get what you need, let us figure it out what we need to get this accomplished. So, Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just, in reading this, I appreciate you requesting us to go through ordinances, because I did learn quite a bit, and I was researching this portion anyway for something else that I was looking into. But I just want to ask 2 questions. So when we just got notification that someone is being served they're going for condemnation proceedings, are we dealing, I don't know what you're seeing out there, Councilor Beyondich, but is it blight, is it garbage, or is it more like where the condition of the house is a concern and possibly a condemnation? So I'm trying to understand, because that seemed to happen quick. But maybe I don't know the back history
Yeah,
of
there
what.
was a complaint from a renter. And so then we had to request to do the inspection. And it's easier when it's coming from somebody that lives there, not the neighbor, because then we were easy to get in, it was able to get in. And so that condemnation actually went fast because it came.
It seemed like it
from-
went quite fast.
Yeah, it came from somebody that was.
So I guess my question is, is that what you're seeing out there, or what people are coming to you with, is it blight, like hauling garbage out of the yard, or is it more like about the actual structure of the dwelling itself?
Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. Actually, I went and looked at the properties that I turned in. They are not, there's nobody living in them. There's nobody living in them. The grass is uncut. Some of the soffits, the pigeons have actually tore down. They're camped in that house. So a lot of in fact, the majority of the properties that I have gone and looked at and turned in, there's nobody living. So it's not so much picking up the garbage or, cleaning that up. And I had asked Britt, are they county owned? Are they rental? What is it? Because nobody's in them. The ones that I've come forward with, a lot of them are vacant buildings. So it's not so much the structure as the neighbors. When you have grass this high and nothing's been done all summer, that's kind of what I'm getting are the empty buildings, the empty homes. So and I know your staff, I've had to reach out. I actually called the city garage one day because somebody threw the bed frame from the bottom sticking out, and I knew it would damage the truck. So I'm like, just a heads up, this has stuff in the dumpster that I don't want to damage our trucks. So it's various people that come forward, and when I went and looked at them, I said, these are all vacant homes. So I'm not quite sure.
And I guess the reason I was asking that is it seemed like the condemnation process went fast.
Depends on what, that certain situation.
That was regarding structure.
Structure, yep.
So I think that's kind of why I was asking what you're seeing, because I think the other steps that we've taken with some of the other property owners, that's dragging on for years.
Yes.
So, and then, is our blight officer a full-time blight officer?
Yes.
So that's the sole job for that
Yes.
person?
Yes, that's what she is. In the summertime, she's cutting grass, taking care of all the blight and everything else. In the wintertime, the blight officer's responsibility is when we're clearing snow from Main Street, she runs the snow blower and does the sidewalks. And then when she's done there, if needed, we use her to drive truck for us, or else she's also doing the sidewalks in town. That is also the blight officer's responsibility.
Okay, so, but mainly addressing blight would be more of a summer job? Is that kind of what you're?
Yeah, I mean, and if we're doing alleys, if we're plowing alleys and that, we come across something that hasn't been buried by snow yet, we go and pick it up. As soon as we find out about it, we pick it up, because gosh, if it's buried and we find it in the spring, it's really nasty. So we try to take care of it as fast as we can in the wintertime.
Got it. So maybe like if the conversation takes place, I mean, if we need to hire or whatever we need to do, maybe it's, this actually needs to be more of a year-round blight
Sure.
inspection process. And maybe that's something we do with the rental code. I don't know, but I think it's worth definitely having a conversation over. And I appreciate everything you guys do.
And the thing of it is, we've fallen behind on house demolitions just because of COVID and the court systems and everything else. And we've done we're on our third house today now. And I guess it's been over the last 3 weeks. I think we're doing it now. And the last previous house that we tore down, when we tore the house down, the neighbor's yard was exposed. And it was full of all kinds of different stuff. Okay, I'll put it that way. We're in a process now of tearing one down today, and the neighbor has the same kind of stuff, but it's organized stuff. You know what I mean? We talked about it as we were putting panels up on the next door houses, and you look at it, and the average person might drive by and say, gosh, look at that garbage all over in his yard. But if you actually get out and you look, everything was organized. He had shelves, and he had this, but he was in a small lot, so I understood what he was doing, but yet everybody else is going to look at it as it's an eyesore. But to him, it's his cherished goods. I mean, you could see it, but the previous house of that, no, I'm not seeing that. Because the roof, the house on it, had tarps for shingles. And dang well they were there forever, and now the house that we're tearing down today, the two houses down, both garages, one doesn't have a roof, the other one's ready to fall in. So this is the problem that we're running into, and we're seeing it also. And eventually, that's going to be an issue. And it's a rental property because there's 7 meters hanging off that house. So I'm thinking there's 7 units in there, and it's scary.
It's going to be really good when we get our rental code and it's being enforced. I think that's going to be but I also would agree to having a conversation maybe about how that goes, what it looks like going forward. I would say that.
Right.
And then I just want to quickly add, after reading some of the items in here, that is a pigeon considered a rodent? Would a pigeon be considered a rodent? Because it's interesting on page 63 in our packet. Rodent harborage, all structures and exterior property shall be kept free from rodent harboring and infestation. Where rodents are found, they shall be promptly exterminated by approved processes which will not be injurious to human health. After pest elimination, proper precautions shall be taken to eliminate rodent harborage and prevent reinfestation. And I just thought that was very interesting as we're talking about pigeons and how we trap them or what we do with them. So I appreciate that you put this on our agenda to read through our ordinances, because I learned something that we actually can, people can, I don't want to use the word exterminate, but that's in our ordinance, so I will use that language that's located within. And I think that as we review these, it's going to be helpful going forward, you know, as we try to build our city and clean up our city. I think this is very, very important, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. So, okay, we have a motion on the floor, and there's been a lot of discussion. We could discuss this for hours. But the motion is to provide direction to staff to come up with some solutions on what they need from us in order to accomplish the goals and objectives we're asking for here today. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Motley.
I'll be quick.
You?
I just want to say thank you.
Whatever time you need.
Thank you, Councilor Beyondich, for bringing this up. Also to Trish, the thankless job that she has. Thank you very much. And then also one last question. Who does Trish report to? Who ultimately tells her what to do?
That would be Jim Rosfith. He's our supervisor. So anything that goes to him, he would direct her and that to do whatever needs to be done. Just like my job also. Anybody at Public Works, that's Jim's job.
So he's the one maybe pulling her off the street to other jobs or letting her do blight when he can let her go?
Yeah, and like I said, the only time that happens is usually in the wintertime. You know what I mean? Because we're hauling snow or whatever, you know. But basically, Jim has a tendency to leave her alone in the summertime to let her do her job, which unfortunately consists of mowing a whole bunch of grass.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Motley. So it has been moved and supported to direct staff to find some solutions on how we can attack the blight more efficiently and effectively, and give to us what tools they need for us to help them accomplish that goal. So is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Great discussion, great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 12 is the discuss policy on usage of city logo on marketing materials.
Okay, this was brought up, so I'll just go from left to right, go all the way around each counselor, makes it a little bit easier. Councilor Motley, and then we'll go around the room.
Okay, just want to chat about a couple things. Thanks to Pam for sending me the policy about social media use. I just wanted to read one thing here. It's page 4 out of 5. Employees and agents and others affiliated with the city may not use a city brand, logo, or other city identifiers on their personal sites, nor post information that purports to be the position of the city without prior authorization. It is my understanding we do not currently have an active Human Rights Commission. A recent event that took place in the city of Virginia on Friday listed the City of Virginia Human Rights Commission as a $500 gold level sponsor. The many concerns I received from my constituents were regarding the logo usage and sponsorship of this event without the council voting upon it. According to our past history regarding spending money, there needs to be a 5-2 majority vote at the council level for all expenditures. I would like to answer my taxpayers' questions as to how the City of Virginia approaches sponsorships and are there logo requirements. As I was recently told, there was a motion made in the past that anytime the city provides services or facilities, we are recognized with our logo. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Motley. So we'll continue to go left to right, no light, no light. Did you have your light on, Counselor Beyondich?
No, that was regarding what we had just voted on. I was going to make another motion, but I'll.
Oh, I
wait till that's-
apologize.
That's okay.
You know, you can, we're discussing stuff, you can go back and make another motion. What would you like to make? Go ahead.
I don't want to enter.
Oh, no, please
don't
do,
wanna
make a
interrupt.
motion. I apologize.
Just back to this, the street and sidewalks.
Sure.
There's a 7.13 and a 7.14, talking about motorized vehicles prohibited on sidewalks, and the other one is restricting and regulating the use of skateboards, roller skates, roller blades, and roller skis. But I think and the purpose of me bringing this also was that if it needs to be updated, we should be doing that. We are now having golf carts, four-wheelers, all-terrain vehicles on our sidewalks and streets that people are concerned about and wondering if they should give up their car and go ahead and buy a golf cart to drive around town. So those are, when I looked at this, I thought, should we be updating this? Are there changes? Can people freely drive a four-wheeler through town or just on the designated routes?
Yes.
Golf carts, they can drive through town. Well, I'm getting rid of my van. I'm going for a golf cart. Thank you.
That's another ordinance. There's a different ordinance that deals with the ATVs and the four-wheelers. That ordinance you're talking about specifically on sidewalks. You can never ride on a sidewalk with a motorized vehicle. That's meant for pedestrians only.
So there are golf carts on our
So
sidewalks?
if you see somebody driving a golf cart on a sidewalk, call the police or get their license, get some description. They have been citing, especially those that are under 16, driving golf carts on sidewalks. And so they've trying to find them, but once they get there, they might be gone. But if you at least get information about where they went, if it was your neighbor, who you saw, then the police would address that.
So to the public, then I would say go ahead and call 911, not
Call
call the
911.
police.
Yep.
911.
Yep.
Take a picture.
Yep,
And
that would be wonderful.
they could be cited.
They could be cited.
So when we get to further ordinances, that will address what is on our streets.
Correct. We do have an ATV route, so there is, what we designated on our ATV route is there are certain streets you cannot go on. Every other street, you can use access from your house to the trail. So the streets you cannot go on, and this is off the top of my head, is 12th Avenue and 8th Street.
So when it's being used as a mode of transportation through town,
It's to get to the trail. You need
Get
to
to
go
the
from your
trail.
house to the trail.
and I'll circle back to the golf carts where I live, we have a lot of young children at night,
Yes.
after dark,
Yes.
hanging on them,
Yes.
going through neighborhoods.
Especially
And-
call the police when you see that.
Oh,
please.
right, and it's scary because I know that cars at these intersections, they're uncontrolled intersections, and I just fear that one day somebody's going to be hit.
Right.
Okay, so I will encourage the public to snap a picture, call it in, and turn in the picture of who's on it.
Where they were, what time it
Where they
was,
were.
where they saw them, that would be wonderful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Beyondich. Okay, back to the item of discussion, the policy and use of the city logo and on marketing materials. No, there's no policy here. We don't have a policy. I know that we had done some research to determine, if there's any guidelines established with respect to the use of a city logo, when the city logo is authorized use, who authorizes use of the city logo, and that kind of thing. So I think this is on the agenda to discuss that. So I'd like to see us talk about maybe establishing some kind of policy so we know who can use our logo, who can't. It should be in such a manner, from my perspective, that it should be, the city logo is used for city business. And if the city is going to sponsor an event, it has to be all events. It can't just be one or the other, or no events. But I think that our city logo, is my personal perspective, any use of our city logo should be for city business only, right? I mean, that's the way I look at it. It makes it simple, it's generic enough, so you're not, each time somebody comes and says, well, is the city sponsoring this? Well, the city might sponsor an event, but when you put the city logo on there without anybody else's knowledge, and I know I got a lot of telephone calls about how this city logo is being used. So it's on the agenda here to discuss what can we do, what mechanisms we can in place, what restrictions do we put on, or do we want to do that moving forward? Councilor Motley.
So did we spend $500 to be a gold level sponsor?
We expended no funds for that event.
If we don't have anybody on the Human Rights Commission, how was the Human Rights Commission of the City of Virginia a gold sponsor? There's no members.
Can you answer that, Counselor Johnson?
I would love to. I'm the Human Rights Commission liaison, and because we don't have one, I ask that we do that from time to time. We've been doing it for about 7 years for different events, Martin Luther King Day. We've done some other events where we've been listed as a sponsor because we provide space, we provide the support, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to call this out. This is because of Pride this weekend. I want to call this out for what it is, because that's what the problem is. It hasn't been a problem in 7 years when we sponsored a Martin Luther King March, an event at the college. The city logo was not an issue when we did the volunteer day in April. So if that's what we're going to talk about, I want to talk about it at an honest level. Part of the reason that I asked that the Human Rights Commission be a sponsor as that is because we need human rights commissioners. We need people who understand that we need to be inclusive and welcoming to everybody in this community. And those people spend money here, they rent buildings here, they do a lot of stuff in this community that makes us thrive. So one of the challenges that I'm having is that nobody in this room asked me any questions. Nobody said to me what's going on. And it's listed in the paperwork we get at the beginning of the year. I'm the Human Rights Commissioner liaison. I'm part of that group. I am actively seeking folks from all kinds of diverse backgrounds so that they can do this. No money was spent. It was a matter of some barricades, just some stuff that we do for all events, for Brewfest, for Land of the Loon, for everything. And the organizing committee wanted to thank the City of Virginia, and that's why the logo is there. So if you've got specific questions, I would be happy to answer them moving forward. If there's specific concerns, I would be happy to answer those. But otherwise, this is the same thing we've been doing since I've been on the council for 7 years, and it's only a problem this weekend. That's all I have for now, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Johnson. Counselor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so I actually received some calls. I was out of town there was some events that happened on Friday, and I am going to discuss this with just as I do when I state talking about an employee and not the employee's name. So I'm going to use the term event. The City of Virginia logo, Human Rights Commission logo, was hosted on an event website as a gold sponsor. The city, no money exchanged hands. Did the city of Virginia give the Klein Cupoletti building to the event?
No, they paid the rental fee.
Okay, so then how is there a level of sponsorship at all when the city did not sponsor this event? And I don't want to have a back and forth.
That's
I'm
fine.
not interested in
Yeah,
having a back and
please,
forth. I'm
please continue.
interested in having
Please
my
continue.
questions answered by our city staff.
They use the committee room for their monthly meetings for this event specifically. So there's a in-kind service. And then they also used our Human Rights Commission mailbox downstairs to receive communication.
Okay. So there's really no level of sponsorship here because other people do the same
And
thing.
then barricades and such, yeah.
But other people do the same thing.
We are on Brewfest, we're a logo on Brewfest's flyer, we're a logo on the Food Truck Festival flyer, we're a logo on Land of the Loon as a sponsor.
But
National
those
Night
are,
Out.
yep, and
Yeah,
those
and we
are
don't-
community events. This is a
Right.
privately held event, not a community event. This is a privately held event. The rental form agreement has Stephen Johnson's name on it.
Human Rights Commissioner, yes.
And then if I'm a liaison to the Cable Commission, do I get to unilaterally make decisions for the whole commission? No, I do not. So I'm not discussing, to me, this isn't about the actual event, this is about our process, and that's why we're here talking about it. And I was out of town and I received a lot of people calling me. So to me, this is not about picking and choosing. This is about what our processes are and how we go forward in addressing them. And you know what, to be honest, I'll just say, there are activity that maybe some people don't approve of. So we're putting the city stamp on something that never came forward for the council to discuss. If the Land of the Loon comes forward usually every year, Festival of Trees Committee comes forward every year, Youth in Action comes forward every year to ask for what have you. And then we choose if, I guess, the city logo goes on that as a sponsor. But for an entity to say that the city is a gold level sponsor means to me that that should have had a process that took place for the city to approve being a gold sponsor to anybody. And that process did not take place. So I'm concerned about the actual logo usage of when that process, it makes it look like the process happened the way that it was advertised. So I'm just concerned that, the City of Virginia's logo was on a privately held event stating that the City of Virginia was a gold sponsor when we, in fact, as a council, did not vote on that. Nor did it come forward as a recommendation from a Human Rights Commission that's non-existent, other than the fact that there is a liaison to that commission. But a liaison doesn't get to vote. A liaison doesn't get to unilaterally make decisions, and that's what I'm concerned about going forward. And as of last night, I received an email that the bill for the Klein Cupoletti building has in fact not been paid. So I don't know if Sherry, if you have information that the $125 was paid, but according to our policy that was sent from Park and Rec, the payment needs to be paid in full along with a deposit of $50 in order for your event to be booked.
Sherry?
Mayor, Counselor, and Counselor Paulson, at this point in time, no, I do not have that information. I wasn't aware that you were going to ask that question. Maybe Brian would have information. I don't know. I'd have to ask the accounting staff if they have received payment.
As of the email that I received yesterday, it has not been paid. Thank you.
Okay,
And
thank you.
verify that as of yesterday at 3 PM, they didn't get the invoice until yesterday. They didn't get
What was that?
they didn't get their invoice till yesterday at 3 PM.
And what our policy states is it needs to be paid up front
And it
before
wasn't
the
because.
facility is used.
And it wasn't because they were in conversion with the new program going from rec desk to Finley Sports. So it will be paid immediately, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Counselor Motley?
And then just to go a little bit to this too, this is why I put in the packet, I did put some examples of logo policies for the council to discuss. Going forward, as Julia mentioned, we do need something clear and defined on when this is going to happen, how it's going to happen, what's going to go on.
Thank you. Counselor Motley, do you have something? No? No? Counselor Freely?
Yeah, in the For What It's Worth department, I and my wife and I had the opportunity to, and the privilege to attend the event at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center. It was a very well-organized, very well-attended event. I ended up having the opportunity to speak to a former student of mine that I saw there, a couple other volunteers from a local church, as well as one that was actually an applicant for a position in this city who's now fiance to a volunteer's mother. So in any event, it was like it was a great opportunity to have some camaraderie and some collaboration and some conversation with people in an event that was very well attended and well organized by Steve. And I appreciate you doing that on behalf of the people in this city that needed that event to give them the opportunity to get together.
Okay, thank you. We're talking about not the event itself. I mean, the purpose is to discuss the logo and how the logo is used, how it arrived at the logo was on that particular website or how it comes on other websites, how that works. And so there are some times in the calls that I received from a lot of people who thought that this was a very polarizing event. That's their opinion. Everybody else has their other opinion. That's fine. But the concern was the same thing that Councilor Paulson brought up. That's why it's on the agenda today, to discuss the logo, how we use it, who authorizes the logo to be used, and under what circumstances they be used. So when I get that question as to why did the city sponsor this event as a 500, I couldn't answer that question because after doing all the research, I found no information with respect to that. So we need to have this conversation about how we're going to move forward. And Britt, thank you for putting together some of the requirements or some of the suggestions of how we move forward with the logo and how we sponsor logos, because we as a community, we as elected body, we want to make sure that our citizens, we run the city in an appropriate manner. We run the city in a manner in which we try to do inclusive for everybody. We also want to make sure that we follow our process. And then when we get questions about a specific event that's being held, and not just the Pride event, not just the one at the Lyric Center, but the others, about why are we sponsoring this event. I've never got any other calls about any other use of the city logo except for this event. So it was polarizing to the community. That's why we got all these calls. But it's not me about the event itself. It's about the process and how we use this logo, how we arrived at that $500 sponsorship without any documentation with respect to that. So I think we're looking for answers for that and methods in which we can move forward to make some kind of an adjustment to how we approve the use of our city logos, no matter what the event is. Councilor Johnson.
Mayor, and I would agree with that. As we move forward, I think that it's a great idea. People want to know what we're spending our money on, and they should know. So I will make a motion to direct staff to create a policy that creates similar to the public use list that we have of how we sponsor, what it means to sponsor an event as a city. There are other events, since this is here, where drinking is encouraged and people have to drive home afterwards. That's a huge concern for me, but that has never been brought up in this room. So I think it's very valid that we look at how we sponsor events and the process we go through and what that means to get the city logo on it. People want to know what the city is doing. And I think, and this came up a long time ago when we first started budgeting $500 a year for Youth in Action. And that's part of our budget that's out there, that every year we give Youth in Action $500 for their conference to help support students who are going to that. And that is one of the things I think that discussion was way back then, was that the city deserves some recognition for supporting our youth, just like we deserve recognition for supporting everybody in the community. So did my motion come out of that, Pam? Did you get something out of that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Would you read back the motion?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry. Read back the motion, please.
Moved by Councilor Johnson, we do not have a support, to allow staff to develop a policy on city-sponsored events held in the city and how the city logo will be used in conjunction with the event.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's the motion on the floor. Is there support for that motion?
Support that.
A support by Councilor Freely. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Motley.
Do we have to have our logo on things? I mean, would it be easier just to say no more logo, no more usage, and then we never have to have this discussion again?
I think that's I think that's part of the motion, to discuss what our intent is to, if we are to use our logo, and we're just going to be provide us some information about that, whether we want to have the logo or not.
Okay.
I think that's all part of that conversation. So.
Okay, thank you.
Before we go back to Councilor Paulson, did you have something? Brian, you want to come forward? And then we'll go to Councilor Paulson. Brian?
Sorry to complicate things, but we're talking about the city logo. We also have the Iron Trail Motors Event Center logo. We use that logo also in exchange for services for a sponsorship for events. So if you're going to draft this policy for the city, I would request the same guidance for the Iron Trail Motors Event Center logo as we have for the city logo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And those might be two separate issues, but we'll address both of them as well. Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, this is kind of a broader conversation regarding sponsorships then as well. You know, and I guess I'm not necessarily comfortable as a council body approving or not approving, you know, sponsorships. I don't know if if it's something that we should or should not be getting into, approving or not approving sponsorships, because you can have people on one side of a spectrum and the polar opposite spectrum, and if they don't get equal treatment, the city of Virginia is going to have a liability issue. So the way I look at this is maybe it is best to not have the logo and just be done with it and not, I have no interest in pitting anybody against anybody. I actually sent the email I asked to Britt because I had people calling out and reaching out to me and I didn't have answers for them. That's why I'm having this discussion here today and hopefully in a professional manner. But going forward, I don't like the fact that if the city is having to decide who are we going to sponsor, if it's alcohol, is it offensive to somebody? If it's marijuana, I mean, if it's this, that, or the other, it could become a liability issue. So I'd like to have staff maybe talk that through and get back to us. But I don't know that I'm comfortable making sponsorship choices. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think my goal and objective is just based on the city logo. When do we use the city logo? When do we do not use the city logo? When do we authorize it? When do we don't? And if we were to do that, we'd have to get approval from the council each time depending on which event it is. I'm supportive of, you don't lose the city logo for anything except for city business. That's it. No events, no sponsorship or nothing. Just for, the city logo is for city business. City business. Now, you want to design a different logo for something else, design the logo, but this is the City of Virginia logo, and we don't want to polarize anybody. I mean, we're trying to be fair. We want to be fair for everyone. But when somebody's offended by that, well, then why don't you sponsor us then? Why'd you sponsor them? So the city logo should be used for city business only. That's my perspective. That's what I'd like to see moving forward down the pike. That's what I would support based upon the motion that was on the floor today.
Thank you, Mayor. I would agree with that. I think that's where my comfort level is at, just no usage at all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the motion is on the floor. It has been moved and supported.
Can I ask?
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Freely.
So city logo, meaning what's behind you, or city logo, meaning the canopy that we use to distribute information for the city's business at all of these?
Or city logo.
Okay, and so that's on our canopy. And so are we saying that we're no longer going to use that canopy for all these events that we typically have it at? That doesn't make any sense to me because some group of people found it offensive to use it at a particular event that was held. I'm troubled by that. Like, we can have it at the Brewfest, we can have it at Night Out, we can have it at Recovery, we can have it at the State Fair, we can have it all over the state, but we can't have it at the event center for a particular group of people that got together on an afternoon. I find that ludicrous that would be considering eliminating the use of our city logo because there was opposition to a particular event.
I think the perspective that I'm trying to convey is that it's for city business, the logo is for the city, whatever city event goes on, it's a city event, city logo goes on the city event. Not to sponsor one and not sponsor the other. When we're talking about sponsorships, not advertising the city, not having the canopy on city events, that's where I'm coming from.
And that's what I'm saying. So is National Night Out no longer a city event? And is Festival of Trees no longer a city event, and is all of these things that we've had our canopy up at over the years, where we've distributed information for people to become familiar with the city of Virginia and all the amenities and benefits that the city provides to all of its constituents, we're gonna no longer do that?
Well, I'm not saying we're no longer doing, all I'm saying is, that's a suggestion that I have. We'll vet that out. We'll decide what we want to do as a group of people. I want to make sure that's fair for everyone. I don't want one group to be offended by another group, or one group, or we approve one sponsorship where we don't approve another sponsorship. I don't think that's right.
Right, and I think like an appearance at somewhere, like at National Night Out, or at the Festival of Trees, or at any of these events that we're at, that's not necessarily a sponsorship and an endorsement of the city of Virginia in regard to this particular event. We're at the event to provide information on behalf of the city to those that are attending the event. So I don't know, I'm troubled by this, because we've had that canopy up and utilized that logo extensively, even as far south as the State Fair, very successfully, and now all of a sudden, there's a concern about that.
Well,
And I don't know what the concern constitutes, to be honest with you, with any legitimacy in my mind.
For me, if money's equated to sponsorship, is paying money, have a sponsorship in lieu of paying money for a sponsorship event, use the city logo in lieu of, or we have $500 sponsorship in this particular case, and we use our city logo, but it's a $500 sponsorship. Well, there's not a $500 sponsorship in some of the other things we use to pass out city information. That's what I'm trying to separate out.
Right, and
That's
so I
all.
would say, we no longer have sponsorships, we just have appearances at these events on behalf of the city of Virginia to provide information to those that are attending. Information that's valuable to anybody and everybody that's attending, from A to Z in the alphabet. I'd hate to see us no longer putting up that canopy and providing that kind of information and that kind of like networking for the community and the outreach that it provides statewide, for that matter, because one event caused people to have angst with regard to the people that were attending that event. That's on them. That's not on the city of Virginia, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing, Councilor Friedli. Yeah, please.
Motion, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, would you please repeat the motion, Pam?
Moved by Counselor Johnson, supported by Counselor Friedlieb, to allow staff to develop a policy on city-sponsored events held in the city and how the city logo will be used in conjunction with the event.
Okay, that's a motion on the floor. It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. The final item I have on the agenda is to approve the resolution authorizing the City of Virginia to make application to and accept funds from the Department of Iron Range Resources for the AUA Headquarters Facility Elevator Upgrade Project. Just for a little bit of history, we had approved this last year. They didn't get funded in the last cycle. They got funded in this cycle, and because they're in the next fiscal year, they need us to update the resolution.
So moved.
Move to approve by Councilor Johnson. Is there support?
Support.
By Councilor Motley. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Any other item of concern, Britt?
No, no further items. Thank you.
Anybody have any other items of concern they'd like to bring up before we adjourn the committee of the whole meeting? Okay, seeing none, we'll adjourn the committee of the whole meeting. It's 12:10 p.m. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody. We are adjourned.